2020, and this year has been a challenging year from a HR perspective, and it has been a multi-pronged challenge for organizations and HR as a function, because business continuity was one challenge, and another challenge was to keep your staff engaged, motivated to perform in such a emotionally and economically challenging environment. And I think HR has lived up to that challenge if we look at the results today. And going forward, I think a lot of things that we have imbibed during our fight with this pandemic are going to stay with us as we move forward. And the post-COVID world would be quite different from the pre-COVID world. And a lot of things that we have, like digitalization, remote working, and all these things will continue for some time as we move forward. And we have a interesting and eminent mix of speakers from government, industry, and academia. And we hope that we have good deliberations on the reimagining the role of HR in the post-COVID world. And with two announcements to make. One, Mr. Pednekar has to go for a meeting. He will be joining little late, maybe towards the end of the session or next session. And secondly, I would request all the speakers to please adhere to the time limit, because we have a long lineup of speakers today. So with these words, I would request Mr. Sunil Kumar Yadav, Chairman FICCI Rajasthan Subcommittee on HR and Skills and Vice President of Honda Cars India Limited, for his remarks. Over to you, Mr. Yadav.
Okay, thank you, Atulji. Good morning, everyone, and a very warm welcome to today's HR Summit organized by FICCI Rajasthan's Committee on HR and Skills. I would like to thank all of you for sparing your time for this conference. I would like to extend a warm welcome to Mr. Ashutosh Pednekar, Managing Director, RICO, who will be joining little later, as informed by Atulji. Dr. Dheeraj K. Pawan, Secretary, Labour, Skill, Employment and Entrepreneurship, Government of Rajasthan. Mr. Dilip Chenoy, Secretary General FICCI. Mr. S.Y. Siddiqui, Executive Advisor, Maruti Suzuki India Limited. Dr. Krishnamurthy Shankar, Group Head HR, Infosys Limited. Dr. Vaishali Dongre, Partner and Head People and Change Advisory, KPMG India. Dr. G.K. Prabhu, President, Manipal University, Jaipur. I would like to thank all our distinguished speakers today for being with us here today and giving all of us an opportunity to learn from their rich experience and wisdom. It gives me immense pleasure to welcome you all to the 5th edition of HR Summit, focusing on the most valuable asset for any institution, industry, society, or nation as a whole, that is human resource. Globalization over the years has brought different perspectives and some new HR practices to Indian culture. Simultaneously, technology has significantly influenced the HR function across the industry. In recent years, HR has undergone dynamic shifts in its roles, functions, and overall impact in shaping organizations. Leaders today, is my voice clear?
Yeah, it's clear. Please go ahead.
Okay. Leaders today are moving away from a process mindset to a more outcome-based mindset. In this digital era, an organization's competitiveness depends on its talent readiness, its skill sets, and how it will bring in a diversity of thought and perspectiveness for organizational excellence. We have a great comparative advantage in terms of the demographic dividend, and we need to focus our initiatives towards translating this comparative advantage into a competitive advantage through inculcating appropriate skill sets, desirable not only within a state or nation, but across the globe. Over 5 million young people are expected to enter India's labor force over the next decade. New technologies such as artificial intelligence, advanced robotics, 3D printing, and cloud computing, among others, are displacing existing jobs and work processes. Given the ambition to drive this scale of growth and development, India needs to keep producing high quality talent. Given this context, the role of the HR function will need to be realigned to contribute to a greater purpose in sync with the larger vision of the country. The HR function needs to continuously invest in talent development and build capabilities for the future. Skilling and reskilling of the workforce to respond to changing job requirements are critical. A recent study suggests that 65% of children starting school today will hold jobs that do not exist yet. Learnability will thus be one of the most essential skills required for gainful employment in future. The unprecedented COVID-19 pandemic has put all organizations to test, and the success of the ones who have thrived through these difficult times can be attributed to their HR teams. I would like everyone to cheer and applaud in acknowledgement of the tremendous role that all of you have played in making sure that our companies survived this crisis and were prepared to encash the opportunity when market starts to look up from August and in the festive season. So each HR person really deserves a great job done by them. HR has played a vital role in shaping the way enterprises responded to this crisis. The function worked beyond its defined roles and helped organizations transition to work in the new normal. Hence, the theme of the fifth HR Summit has been aptly chosen as reimagining the role of HR in the post-COVID world. I am sure that the HR Summit 2020 would dwell upon all these issues and suggest a way forward for the benefit of our human resources. We at FICCI are committed to working in close coordination with the government, industry, and academia in ensuring Rajasthan and country as a whole to be in the bright spot. We are very glad to provide a platform for effective collaboration between the three parties to develop new solutions for an inspired India. I wish you all very best. Do hope that you enjoy the session today. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Yadav, for that crisp overview and opening comments. And now I would request Mr. Dilip Chenoy, Secretary General FICCI, for his address. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Atul, and a very good morning to everybody here. Um, Mr. Ashutosh Pednekar, Managing Director, RICO, Dr. Niraj J. Pawan, Secretary, Labor, Skill Employment and Entrepreneurship, Government of Rajasthan, Mr. Sunil Kumar Yadav, Co-Chair, Rajasthan State Council HR Subcommittee, and VP Honda Cars, Mr. S.Y. Siddiqui, Executive Advisor, Maruti Suzuki India Limited, a very, very dear friend, Dr. Krishnamurthy Shankar, Group Head, HR Infosys, good to see you again. Dr. Vaishali Dongre, Partner and Head, People and Chain Advisory, KPMG. Dr. Prabhu, President, Manipal University, Jaipur. Of course, my colleague Atul Sharma, Head of the Rajasthan office of FICCI. Good morning. I hope that all of you are keeping well and welcome to this session. Actually, from the last HR conference to this, and I remember I was there at the large HR conference as well, two things have happened which have dramatically reimagined or repositioned the role of HR in organizations. The first one everybody has actually referred to, which is the COVID crisis and how we have to work from home. And of course, some manufacturing organizations and very human intensive service organizations are getting a large number of people back either to the shop floor or to the organization. But a lot of others are actually yet have a kind of partial work from home and partial work from office. And some others, in fact, in the IT space, are saying that only 25% of the employees will be in office 25% of the time. So that is one change that has happened. And HR actually in the old pre-COVID era used to be very much dependent on FaceTime, on one-to-one kind of discussions or one-to-many discussions, getting feedback, looking at body language, a lot of emotional intelligence and everything going on there. And now it has actually gone into, a digital communication. In another context, the former finance minister, Mr. P. Chidandaram said that virtual courts are good, but in a physical court, you could actually understand what the judge was feeling by looking at his body language or expressions and all of that. So in the digital world, that is actually kind of missing even in the HR space. The second change which has happened, and a lot of people may say, oh, this is an IR issue, this is not an HR issue, and this is that classic challenge that we have between IR and HR, is that the entire whole labor regulation has been rewritten, and we have these different codes coming in and the rules are coming in. So, if I were to say that while the pandemic, COVID pandemic actually resulted in some sort of disruption, someone has actually moved the cheese in terms of the whole regulations and rules, etc., on the HR space. So with these two things happening, literally a lot of, the HR groups within companies and within organizations have to reinvent themselves literally. Like it was mentioned, and the co-chair said that we need to applaud the role of the HR people managing teams during COVID at the organizational level. And it has actually demonstrated the true value of HR and shown the need and importance of investing not only in flexible and robust HR processes and structures, but also in looking really as our colleagues, humans as resources going forward. And a lot of the organization stability and strength that has been, or resilience that has been demonstrated by organizations really has been of how do you identify the key challenges to motivating and to enabling people to take entrepreneurial roles in existing organizations, so that in times of crisis, we can actually look at going forward. Now, the interesting thing, and today that you're going to be debating, is that given the changing business context on the two dimensions, right? How should the HR organization align itself to create an impact? And how do you ensure that the really talented and creative people are engaged with the organization and continue to add value in the organization, while you also find ways of looking at specific training and learning and development needs for these others. In fact, the whole learning and development space is also changing, because with a lot of physical learning and development programs not being held, you have to have virtual kind of programs. Then the HR people are really spoiled with choice, because if I were to take a very different example from the service sector, if you want to train chefs, there are close to about nearly 1 crore videos on chef training on the internet today, given by different people around. And how do you actually find what is good for a person and going forward? And the whole HR function, the training and development function going forward is going to be very interesting. But I'm not the expert, really. The experts are the people who are actually going to speak to you. I really, Infosys and Maruti Suzuki are great organizations. They have developed extremely good practices, and I'm sure that they will be, both Mr. Siddiqui and Dr. Shankar will be able to really throw more light on this. I would like to welcome from my side each one of you. Thank you very much for joining today, and thank you for being willing to share your experiences and your knowledge. And I'm sure each of the members and each of the participants who joined today will find this whole session contributing to a little bit of learning on how their organization could embark on a conscious journey to create a future-ready HR organization. So again, thank you very much for having me with you, and keep safe and keep smiling, and use your HR functions to create a thriving and organization going forward. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. And now we have Dr. Vaishali Dongre, partner and head People and Change Advisory, KPMG India. I would request her for her theme presentation. Over to you.
Thank you so much. Thanks for this opportunity. I'm really humbled to see so many eminent seniors and friends and mentors on the screen. Um, I'll start with, I have just 10 minutes, and it's a very massive topic we are discussing, and there's so much of things to say. But I'll start by saying that this at a work situation, this crisis has not only taught things at a work situation, but this crisis, this situation has also made us learn so much about life. One learning, it is definitely there for sure, and for a long time we'll remember, is that life is far more than work. I realized that in 9 months, when I used to take flights, almost 8 flights a week, this crisis and this situation has taught me that you have to look at life so differently. This situation has just made you humble as an individual, and we as HR people and HR folks has also taught us to look at our employees, our people, our loved ones, our colleagues in such a different light altogether. There are so many learnings for us also in the HR space, and that's what I'm going to talk in the next 5 minutes, that what are few of the organizations doing from the HR point of view. What is the agenda looking like going forward? Is it going to change? But definitely for sure, life has its new operating model altogether, and we have to get aligned to it because it is here to stay. So let me just maybe share my screen um, and project. I'm not sure whether you can see it. Is my screen visible?
Not yet.
Not yet. Okay, I'll go without. Uh,
I'll share your presentation from here, ma'am.
oh, okay, great.
No, it's visible now. It's
Perfect.
visible.
So we'll go
Make it.
straight to the next slide, Rahul. If we can just move to the next slide and save our time. Uh, what basically it means is that there are 7 things which HR, my learning for the last 9 months and discussing with so many senior HR and business and board members, is that there are 7 things organization clearly is relooking and reshaping. The first one is the entire operating model of the work. The future of workforce landscape is changing. We were operating with just the full time and go to office workforce. Now it's changing. Now we have an on-site, off-site, virtual gig. There's something known as neo gig which has come in. There's something very interesting which has come taught us that there could be a liquid workforce. All of it together is changing the shape in which we were working. The structure of work itself is changing for us. So first part of the entire discussion which HR and the board members are doing is around the cost, and rightly so. How do you balance cost and our employee has been one of the most critical discussion and reflection. Many leaders, not just the CHROs, but even the CEOs have been reflecting. Second, if so much of the world of workforce is changing, how is HR reshaping? Are there new skills coming in? Is there a new agenda for HR? I would say yes, there is, and but there was an already existing agenda that is reinforced, and there are new things. So one thing which definitely is new, many CHROs were doing it, and they will continue to do it, but many of them who were not looking at from that lens have started looking at the cost part. Cost has become a very critical scorecard for the HR folks. So it's not just the CFO's agenda today, it's even the CHRO's agenda. The third one is around the entire performance management system. We have people who have moved away from us. They are working in remote location. We can't see them. We can't observe them. And in this situation, how are you overall going to look at the entire performance management system? So from a outcome driven performance management system, a very productivity linked performance management system is now here to stay. So digitalization, productivity linked performance management, and a very outcome based performance management system. People are building it. Digitalization was introduced by many of us. But how do you use your laptop or your computer to make the performance interpretation and the collaboration interpretation? Because employees for us are now really far away from our eyes and observation is not really there. So, can there be certain features like group stakeholder doing the performance management? All of that is coming into play. The two aspects which I'm going to highlight are leadership effectiveness and the culture part. Now, leaders' mandate, again, like the CHRO's mandate, even the leader's mandate has changed. Now, leader has to up his game from a talent management point of view. The CEO, the board members have also got the talent as their agenda, because there are times when you will have to ring fence your talent because now the market has opened up. How do you, with this given scenario, which is going to be business as usual, how do you retain, engage, motivate your talent? That's the agenda now, no more just with the CHRO, but also with the CEO. The last one I would want to highlight here is the sixth and seventh. I may not want to highlight because it's been talked and done really well, but the culture part is very important for us. Now, let me call out two organizations which I have tremendous respect, and my mentors here are on the call, Maruti and Infosys. They have their own culture. Now, people have spread, they have moved away from the organization. And how do you cascade the culture to the homes, to the last level? It's a very difficult agenda. Culture, managing culture within the office framework was also, we were finding it difficult. Now, how do you do when there's so much of heterogeneity in the workforce landscape? How do you do this when the people are moved so far away from you? New people are joining you, they don't know you, they don't know your DNA. So, how do you manage the entire culture? So, that is a very important agenda. And from the long term sustainability point of view, this part of our agenda is going to be extremely critical for us. I'm going to pause here. I have 2 or 3 more slides, but I think I have synthesized what I wanted to say, and it's a really good opportunity for hear from the people on this platform. Very senior, very experienced, very practical, with very practical and pragmatic experience. Over to you, Yadav sir, for taking it forward. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Dongri. And now I would request Dr. Krishnamurthy Shankar, who is Group Head of Human Resources at Infosys Limited, to share his perspective. Over to you, Mr. Shankar.
Okay. Good afternoon. Good morning, everybody. Firstly, it's a pleasure to be here. Amidst all great people around. So, firstly, thank you for inviting me to share my thoughts. As Vaishali said and Mr. Chenoy said, we've been through very kind of once in a lifetime kind of a situation. Yeah, I think this pandemic has really come and kind of given a lot of lessons for us. So what I'll do now is really take a couple of minutes just to talk about 2 or 3 key things and what does it mean for HR. Yeah, and those are some of the things that I'll try and share as we go forward. I think the first one is if I really look at what this pandemic has done. Yeah, I think firstly, it has accelerated the digitization. I think many companies were doing it, but now people have started realizing that this is going to be the way forward. So there is lots more focus on how can we be a more digital kind of a company. So we're trying to automate many processes. We're going to really looking at bringing lots more technology there. And many processes which were, for example, physical based are now becoming digital, right? There is a little bit of physical, but also lots more digital. So I think we have slowly accelerated and moved towards a much more digitized kind of a world in which we are going to live. And what it has also done, this pandemic, is really tell us that, listen, we've got to be ready for being more resilient. We've got to be more agile. And you see that this is kind of like an inflection point. Companies that are quick to kind of adjust and companies that are resilient and can grow faster will actually take advantage of this period. Yeah. And I think the focus on being very agile, being very resilient, flexible has become more important now. The second thing is the changing nature of how work is getting delivered. We are going to see much more what I would call as distributed workplaces. We're all like different places. It's not all coming together in one place. We're all distributed, so therefore we're all disaggregated. And in the future, you may not even have, the workplace as we see it. If you look at an IT industry, most of them, about 98, 99% of the people are working from home. In the past, it was never possible because of various reasons. Now that's been kind of, that concept has been proven that we are working from home. But it's also not forever that we're going to live with this kind of a working from home, because we've built, we're able to do all this because of all the relationships and the social capital that we built. Over time, that will come down. Yeah, as Vaishali said, that element of culture, those relationships, all of that may come down, and therefore people will need to get back into it. And therefore, we would assume that we need some kind of a hybrid workplace, that people will come to work maybe 2 days a week or something, get connected, look at problems, discuss, and then maybe do their individual work remotely. So those are some of the models that will come across. I think the last one is what this is also changing is that it is bringing to fore what kind of people do we need? Yeah, it is also opening up some newer ideas. For example, it really says that you've got to have much more specialized workforce for the future because of being digital, because of the changes that is happening. But it is also opening up some alternate talent pools. Yeah, it is saying, okay, can we look at some contingent workers, what we call as gig workers, maybe more part-time. So this is opening up a lot more. If you don't all have to be in the same place at the same time, can you think of different ways? So therefore, these are some things that it is opening up to. So I think if I look at from an HR perspective, I think we step back and say, wow, this is happening. This is what is happening in the world. These are some 3 big changes that are there. Now, what does it mean for HR? And if I really go and look at what does mean, I think there are 3 key things that HR has to lead. And I'm calling it the 3 big transformations for the future. And let me take a minute just to talk about each of these. Yeah. The first one is this talent transformation. Each organization has to get the talent ready for the digital future. How are you going to reskill your talent to become much more digital? In some industries like technology, this is much more acute. We got to do it much more faster. In some others, maybe lesser. But all industries have to transform the talent. They've got to learn, they've got to get new capabilities in their talent. And I think what this future is teaching us is that things are going to be much more faster, much more digital. You're going to have much more agile teams working. You're going to have much more flexible and resilient teams. And if you need all of this, you need the right talent. Yeah. So therefore, the capacity of the talent, the capability, the kind of alternate talent pools that you all can change. And that's the first agenda that HR has to lead over the next few years. I think the second one is what I call as the employee experience transformation. I think there are 2 vectors here that one has to look at. I think the first one clearly is this experience of employees all about, earlier we used to look at wellness as some physical wellness, some amount of mental health, but that has become very important now. People are now saying, wellness is at the heart of heart of our employee experience, the well-being of employees, because now you're looking at social, how are their social connections? You're looking at their emotional wellness, the mental health, all of that together. So the well-being has taken a much larger view, and I think that's one focus area for HR as we go forward. And I think we in Infosys are really taking that as a big priority for our employees. The second part of this employee experience is this employee experience will also become much more digital now. So it's all about the technology experience. What is the digital interface that employees are doing? There's a feeling, and a lot of research has said that Zoom calls are the most tiring kind of a thing. It's followed by audio calls. Audio calls are much better, and face-to-face meetings makes people much more relaxed because their mind is much more at ease, because they're able to really connect much more faster. So you see that the stress levels of a video meeting is probably the highest. Now we got to understand these kind of things and design our employee experience so that it doesn't put unnecessary stress on people. At the same time, you're able to really work in a proper way. So I think we've got to, and the third part of this employee experience is going to be, we're all going to be working very differently. HR will also be remote. How does HR look at this completely? What should be, how can HR think of using technology as well as non-technology ways to connect with people? Because you've got to get that employee experience in a very remote world. So this is a big challenge for us. Yeah. So if I look at the employee experience, three key parts: the whole element of well-being, the whole element of digital kind of a technology experience. And the third is how will HR really connect with people in a much more deeper way. I think the last part is this culture transformation is what we've got to lead. When we're all working in a remote hybrid world, when things are changing much more, what we need is our leaders and employees to change differently, to be a bit different. So what are the things they would need? I think first, I think we need in our teams a lot more of empowerment. We need our teams to be a lot more what I call as more confidence, more trust in the teams. How do you build this psychological safety? I think that's the word that people are really using now, that teams can really work on their own. At the same time, how do individual people take more accountability for their work? If you put more productivity measures, it may be counterproductive. Yeah. So therefore, you've got to create culture because you can't control things with too many of these measures. So what is it that you do? You can only do it through culture. So this transformation of our culture, led by the kind of leaders and managers that we have, how they're going to change and behave, how we're going to create more ownership amongst employees, that's going to be very important. Yeah. So those are the three big changes that HR has to lead, and I see many companies have started working on this. And I'll just summarize by just talking about, I've spoken about some of these, but at the heart of all of these are these things that we've got to really look at. When I look at the enterprise, it's all about this whole concept of learning, whole concept of getting the leaders to say, can we focus on the learning for the future, leadership, connecting with people and building this agility at that enterprise level. But the thing becomes very important at the team level. How do you really bring this whole thing about psychological safety there? What kind of shared purpose do we have, and how do these are some of the things that we got to accelerate, build as we start building great teams, which will be working in a resilient way in a much more distributed, remote kind of an environment. And I think the last part I mentioned about this individual, key things is for each one, for her, for every individual who's working, how do you connect with their purpose? And that's going to be very critical, because unless that is there, you're not going to really, get the best out of them. And these become much more important in the new world, in a new remote world, in a more digital world. And that's important for us. I also spoke of well-being and connectedness. Yeah. So I think if I just look at all of these and say, okay, how is HR going to change in the future? You can just summarize by saying, listen, there are those three key transformations that HR has to do. And that transformation has to be done across all levels. You got to look at the enterprise, you got to look at the teams and at the individual. And the heart of all of this is to ensure that the element of culture, the element of the humanness that you want to bring in your culture to manage all these changes is retained. And I think that's where we all have to play a big role, get all our leaders together and make that change. So I thought I just share some of my thoughts. It's a very, very interesting time for all of us. Thank you for joining in and wishing you all the very best as we all kind of together co-create the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Shankar, for taking us through this transformative journey of HR. And now I would request Mr. S.Y. Siddiqui, Executive Advisor, Maruti Suzuki India Limited, for his address on leadership in a world of disruption. In fact, Mr. Siddiqui is a renowned speaker in the HR fraternity and authority on the subject, and is associated with our HR conclave over a period of time. So over to you, sir.
Thank you, Atul. Is the audio clear, please?
Yeah, it's fine. Please.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Very, very privileged to be here. As Atul mentioned, would have loved to be there physically, but now with this pandemic, I think everything is virtual. And I'm very happy to connect with some great friends from HR. I can see Sunil after a very, very long time, Dr. Kr Shankar, Mr. Dilip Chenoy, a very, very long time. I saw him today. Great pleasure. Dr. Vaishali Dongre. I can also see Dr. Akil Busrai with us on the session right now. So very, very happy to be here. When I am talking about this experience of ours, leadership in a world of disruption, I think it will be from the real time what we experience, but the context will be little wider than only this corona pandemic. I think 2006-7, we all were struggling with this first time experience of this global recession. And the world over, it was being talked that we do not have any professional who has gone through this kind of a deep, recession ever. And therefore, we were just groping in the dark for how to handle that. In between, then we saw a number of times economy diving, low sentiments, degrowth of the market. 1920, to be precise, for auto industry was minus 18% after many years. So it was quite a shock at that point of time. And then we bumped into this corona pandemic. Big, big, big problem. Initially, we thought it's going to be a kind of economic crisis, but very quickly we realized it is going to be a big, big, big people crisis. But what happens is in all these situations, which I am setting the context is, leadership of every institution, every organization, every corporate, every industry comes under tremendous pressure. Real test of leadership character comes out in this kind of adversity. And perhaps when we look at this perspective, then one thing very interesting which is being discussed in the corporate circles and otherwise also, that what will be the credo of leadership in this new world of disruption? And perhaps when we look at our learning in Maruti, perhaps during this 8-9 months, very tough kind of unprecedented crisis, one thing which was very, very clear is that the loss of business completely, kind of jerk or shock in terms of economic activity being stopped. We realized in Maruti, April, first time in our history of 37 years, we did not produce any cars and we did not sell any cars. It was quite a new kind of a shocking experience for us. So first quarter was literally a kind of a very tough phase, April, May, June. At that point of time, even many companies, business sectors are facing cash crunch. And to a great extent, all of us in common were facing this fear bug, uncertainty bug in employees, their families, what will happen to them, what will be the future. I think from the leadership perspective, at that point of time, what we learned in Maruti, I think the biggest role was to communicate with our people, 35,000 people, somehow establish communication with them and create that kind of a positive assurance that the leadership is fully competent to take care of this kind of a crisis, although unprecedented. That was, I think, the first memory which by mistake, by default, we were getting into. At the same time, perhaps to a great extent, we also ensured that all our people, whether regular shop floor associates or temporary workers or contract workers or apprentices, if they are staying there in Gurgaon, they should be well taken care during that lockdown. Very, very conscious, compassionate leadership perspective, which is hallmark of our company for the last 37 years, was on front to really take care of the people in this very, very shocking kind of pandemic. Perhaps when we look at the reboot recovery phase, as Dr. Shankar mentioned, that the biggest priority at that point of time was the health and safety of our people, not producing cars. So when we look at middle of May, June, July, I think we were trying to bring in every countermeasure to ensure that we take care of the health, safety, and well-being of our people first at the workplace. And the resultant was that there was this element of commitment and pride for people to be very eager to come back to work. In our case, unlike the IT industries, the factories today are running full pre-COVID level production, 150, 60, 70,000 a month. That's a huge kind of volume we produce. And that means 30,000 people are actually on the workplace, physically working in our factories. So that's even a tougher challenge to take care of them at that point of time. When we look at this migrant workers crisis, there was a big learning there. We took care of our people. So we lost only 15, 20% of our people. Rest everybody hovered around us in Gurgaon, in Manesar, in Delhi, in Noida, so that they were available when we started this reboot recovery process middle of May. Okay, work from home for old economy companies like Maruti was never a belief, but by default, it became a potential. We realized that potential during this phase. As Dr. Shankar also mentioned, digitization was the biggest tailwind which we could see in this last 8, 9 months. To a great extent, it was a huge learning for us, huge potential for us going forward. Maybe, but one question which comes very clearly in my mind, whether it is the top leadership role, whether it is the HR strategic role, the business process reengineering, reskilling, upskilling will be a very big agenda when we are looking at this digitization potential going forward. And as Dr. Vaishali mentioned, culture will be a big challenge when we look at this high-tech environment, very, very digital kind of processes. Then how do we bring and retain this high touch? That is one challenge for a company like Maruti, where we are likely to look at an optimum balance between work from home and work from the workplace. So those people in the managerial roles, in the white collar roles, if they are working from home, there will be a refresher kind of visit for them to be in touch with the larger company, to be in touch with the larger institution. When we look at one more learning, and especially for HR, there were reactive decisions taken by certain businesses, certain corporates, which were negative, which also resulted into cost saving in terms of downsizing, very, very reactive kind of decisions on people's strategy. However, in my thinking, and many mature companies displayed that people's strategy should be looked at from the medium to long-term perspective, not reactive. In Maruti, we never look at that in a reactive fashion. So instead of looking at any such negative countermeasures, we looked at bringing in people with the best of assurance, kind of psychological safety, what Dr. Shankar was mentioning, and then looking at their contribution to the company. That commitment, that kind of loyalty, what we expect from our people, I think the top leadership will first have to display that kind of care and affection and compassionate leadership to bring this, people back into work situation, and then look at that stretch effort, that kind of contribution, that kind of culture where people are happy to contribute in spite of this pandemic, this fear kind of environment. To a great extent, perhaps when I look at our learning, distributed leadership, decentralized, empowered, helped us big way. When we started, we were not very sure what will be the best way to go forward. So maybe 15, 20 of us, including our Japanese colleagues, were trying to dialogue and deliberate how to decode. And to a great extent, we were depending on our team leaders to really show the way. So it was basically sometimes bottoms up and sometimes top down. So it was a kind of a great example of how collective leadership, distributed leadership can work in this kind of a crisis. Maybe a huge learning going forward for me is that handling adversity and crisis will become a very, very critical competency of leadership in future. To a great extent, perhaps when we look at this patient, compassionate leadership, risk taking, exploring new, uncharted territories, that will become part of maybe the new leadership credo. But to a great extent, perhaps I think there will be a revised kind of a mix in terms of the leadership traits when we are looking at leadership in this new world of disruption. I think it will be a very balanced, delicate, balanced mix of the kind of vision quotient, which is normally very low, business quotient, which is overloaded all the time, and emotional quotient, which is literally absent in our kind of leadership, kind of patterns, behaviors, which we have seen in the past. But I think this trend will have to change post-COVID To a great extent, we are looking at this criticality of envisioning the future into the present. So vision quotient will be very critical. Ethically correct kind of intent and stance, credibility, perhaps to a great extent part of the vision quotient. And of course, emotional quotient will have to bring in this little perspective of simplicity, maybe leadership modesty, and maybe the Japanese model, walk the talk. Very, very simple, just walk the talk. So perhaps when we look at compassionate leadership, I'm looking at empathy to be a big, big, big trait going forward. Listening leadership will become very effective in my thinking going forward, part of the emotional quotient of leadership. Compatibility with kind of a very normal situation and kind of a crisis situation, keeping calm. It is a kind of MS Dhoni leadership style, keeping calm. That will become a very important trait when we talk of handling adversity. To a great extent, perhaps when I'm looking at transformational leadership, capability to, understand change, lead change, adapt and adopt. That will become another important trait in my thinking. Strategic and integrated view of business, short term, medium term, long term, backup plan A, backup plan B, backup plan C, keeping those kinds of reserves for the rainy day, like Maruti's, cumulative profit, 40,000 crores, is somewhere you create strength for your company to handle an adversity and crisis. That will become a kind of real leadership test in my thinking. To a great extent, what is out, what is gone is command and control. It will not work post-COVID. So leaders will have to be very, very fixated leadership styles, totally outdated, will not work at all. Perhaps when we are talking of millennials, when we are talking of gig workforce, when we are talking of new employment contract, flexibility, adaptability will be the name of the game. And somewhere there perhaps is the biggest learning, and maybe HR will have to play that very strategic role of evolving this kind of leadership, which will be really capable of handling such disruptions. When we are looking at one last perspective, when we are looking at our board level leadership, then instead of ornamental boards or country club gossiping boards, I think we'd have to shift towards committed boards, questioning boards, boards which can perhaps dialogue, discuss, which can also, as Dr. Vaishali said, can have a talent agenda, boards which will be committed for the stakeholders, for the shareholders, to really create a sustained growth with ethical perspective, governance perspective going forward. So I think I would like to restrict myself here in the given time constraint. Very happy to be here. My best wishes for us, all of you, that we see better times soon. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Siddiqui. It's always a delight to listen to you and get a fresh perspective on the HR scenario. And our next speaker is Dr. Neeraj K. Pawan, who is Secretary Labor, Skill, Employment and Entrepreneurship for Government of Rajasthan. And in fact, during this COVID crisis, he and his team has done a commendable job in terms of people who migrated from other states regarding creating a database of skills, launching a Raj Kaushal portal and connecting them to industry so that they can find gainful employment opportunities here. So without taking much of your time, I would request Dr. Neeraj K. Pawan for his address. Over to you, sir. सर आपकी आवाज नहीं आ रही सर. हाँ अब थोड़ा आ रहा है, अब आ रहा है. आ रहा है सर, कुछ डिस्टरबेंस भी है बट आ रहा है, आवाज आ रहा है. प्लीज. अब नहीं आ रहा सर. नहीं, नाउ इट्स ऑडिबल सर. प्लीज.
बड़ा माइग्रेशन हुआ राजस्थान से और लाखों लोग यहाँ आए, लगभग 13-14 लाख लोग बाहर से लौट के यहाँ पर आए. आवाज आ पा रही है, नहीं आ पा रही?
आ रही है सर, आ रही है, धीरे धीरे आ रही है, बट वी आर एबल टू लिसन टू यू.
मैं सिस्टम को इम्प्रूव कर रहा हूँ. हमने काफी कुछ मैनेज करने की कोशिश किया है. लाल कौशल पोर्टल के माध्यम से अब लाखों जो लेबर हैं पूरी सूचनाएं लोग भी लेना चाहे वो हमारे पास अवेलेबल है। इसके अलावा भी काफ़ी सारे नए इनिशिएटिव्स हमने लेने को दिए। जैसे हम ये चाह रहे थे कि स्किलिंग के लिए 17 मार्च को हमने हमारे सारे सेंटर्स बंद कर दिए। तो जो स्किल्ड लेबर, स्किल्ड वर्कफोर्स हम मार्केट को सप्लाई कर पाते वो होना सब बंद हो गया। हमें भारत सरकार ने, गवर्नमेंट ऑफ इंडिया परमिटेड अस टू रीओपन एंड रीस्टार्ट आवर स्किल डेवलपमेंट सेंटर्स ऑन 21st of September. And on 31st of September itself, we started all our SDCs, skill development centers, and now they are functioning well. And we are very much confident that some months to come, we will be reaching the same level as what we were doing pre-COVID era. लेकिन चैलेंजेस जो सबसे ज़्यादा हमारे सामने आ रहे हैं, इस कोरोना ने बहुत कुछ चेंज किया, आपने काफ़ी डिस्कस किया है, लेकिन फिर भी हमारी वर्कफोर्स में दो तरह के लोग, सरकारी वाले और प्राइवेट वाले। तो जो गवर्नमेंट की वर्कफोर्स है, जो हमारे रेगुलर एम्प्लॉइज हैं, उनके सामने ज़्यादा चैलेंजेस है कि वो इतने टेक्नोप्रोन नहीं, neither they are technoprone nor they are having any willingness to learn, लेकिन उनको पॉसिबिलिटी सीखना पड़ा। उनको ये सारे जो सिस्टम्स हैं उन सबको सिखाने के लिए हम जो लीडरशिप है उनको जो हायर अथॉरिटी है उनको काफ़ी प्रॉब्लम्स आ रही है। इवन अभी भी काफ़ी सारा जो नए सी एस ने किया, जब उन्होंने सब कुछ फिर ऑनलाइन क्यों नहीं करते थे सारा मतलब जो हमारे पास डेटा है, जो हमारे पास फाइल्स है, उनका मूवमेंट ऑनलाइन क्यों नहीं हो सकता, ताकि कभी भी कोई भी आदमी देख सके और वो घर बैठ कर की उस फाइल पर हिसाब कर सके। लेकिन सच्चाई ये है कि गवर्नमेंट में सारा काम वर्क फ्रॉम होम या ऑनलाइन नहीं हो सकता, उसमें करना ही पड़ेगा, फाइल चलानी ही पड़ेगी, आपको फिजिकली देखना ही पड़ेगा। जैसे वारंटी में अभी फैक्ट्री में जो काम हो रहा है, सिटी के साथ बता रहे थे, वो तो मौके पर जाके ही होगा ना। सबसे बड़ा हिट जो इंडस्ट्री टूरिज्म और हॉस्पिटैलिटी इंडस्ट्री ने हिट लिया था, अब वो भी खुलने लगा है। अभी कल परसों की रिपोर्ट्स आई है कि अब काफ़ी कुछ ठीक होने की बुनियाद पर है और लोग बाहर निकल रहे हैं, डोमेस्टिक टूरिज्म बढ़ा है। इवन जो विलेज टूरिज्म जिसकी एक कंसेप्ट मानी जाती थी कि वहाँ पर गाँव में बुलाइए, वहाँ ठहराइए और वो अच्छा रहेगा, तो केवल फॉरनर सिर्फ यूज करते थे। अब डोमेस्टिक टूरिस्ट भी वहाँ पर उसको ऑप्ट कर रहा है। तो मुझे लगता है कि अब ये इकोनॉमी जब ओपन अप हो रही है, उस समय लेबर, स्किल्ड लेबर और जो छोड़ के चली गई थी या इस नए एरा में, इस नए सिनारियों में उसे रीस्किलिंग की, अपस्किलिंग की आवश्यकता है, वहाँ हमारे रोल बहुत ज़्यादा भूमिका होगी। हम कोशिश कर रहे हैं कि इंडस्ट्री की डिमांड के आधार पर आपसे हम ये अपेक्षा करेंगे कि आप हमें बताएं किस तरह की स्किल सेट की आवश्यकता है। तो पहली चीज़ तो हमारी गवर्नमेंट साइड हम ये कहना चाहेंगे कि जो आपके इंडस्ट्री पार्टनर्स हैं वो अपनी डिमांड हमें जरूर दें। डिमांड देने का आसान तरीका है, राज कौशल पोर्टल पर आप अपना रख सकते हैं, सीधे हमें ईमेल भी कर सकते हैं। दूसरा हम ये चाहेंगे कि जो बड़ी कंपनीज हैं, जैसे हम मारुति हमारे साथ जरूर कर सकते हैं, हमारे साथ नहीं, आज दुबई की किसी फर्म के साथ हमारा जो आज जो खुद अपने ऑन साइट स्किलिंग करेंगे, उसका पेमेंट हम करेंगे। मतलब ये देखिए बहुत नया मॉडल पे लेके जा रहे हैं बड़ी इंडस्ट्री के लिए, और आपको यूआई के माध्यम से आने की जरूरत नहीं, हम सीधे भी कर सकते हैं आपके साथ। जो बड़ी कंपनीज है उनके साथ हम सीधा टाइप कर सकते हैं, एमओयू कर सकते हैं कि वो अपनी स्किलिंग कराएं, खुद कराएं। जैसे जेम्स एंड ज्वेलरी वाले करवा रहे हैं, उनको दे भी दिया, उनकी स्किलिंग चालू भी हो गई है। जैसे कोटी वाले करा रहे हैं, तो वो जैसी आपकी आवश्यकता है वो हम गवर्नमेंट जोड़ना चाहती है कि हमारे पास स्किल्स का पैसा है, हम अपने एसडीसी की बजाय जो स्किल डेवलपमेंट सेंटर होता है वो आप अपने डिवाइस में चला सकते हैं। इसके लिए जो मॉनेटरी सपोर्ट है वो हम आपको दे सकते हैं। आखिरी चीज़ जो मुझे कहनी है, चूँकि गवर्नमेंट में और प्राइवेट सेक्टर में ये जो बेसिक कल्चर का फर्क है कि वहाँ पर आदमी मन से रोज के लिए काम करना पसंद करता है। यहाँ चूँकि उसकी एक सेफ्टी है, अच्छा काम करोगे तो भी उसकी तनख्वाह मिल रही है, खराब काम करोगे तो भी उसकी तनख्वाह मिल रही है। तो इंसेंटिव और डिसइंसेंटिव का नहीं होना एक बड़ी वजह है कि यहाँ गवर्नमेंट सेक्टर में रोज उतनी नहीं हो पाती, तो उतना जो हमारे एम्प्लॉइज हैं वो उतने मोटिवेटेड नहीं होते। प्राइवेट सेक्टर में काफ़ी काम करते हुए हम अपने ऑफिसर्स को भी तैयार कर रहे हैं कि वे भी अगर एट पार नहीं भी आ पाए तो कहीं ना कहीं वो सिमिलर लाइन्स पर आए, सीखें और जो प्राइवेट सेक्टर की पॉजिटिव चीज़ें हैं उसको हम इनकलकेट करें गवर्नमेंट सेक्टर में। तो मेरा अभी सिर्फ इतना ही कहना है कि इसमें बहुत सारी चीज़ें आप और हमको मिल करके कर सकते हैं, जो कि लेबर के इश्यूज़ हैं, स्किलिंग के इश्यूज़ हैं, उसके अलावा हमारे पास एम्प्लॉयमेंट के इश्यूज़ हैं। ये तीनों चारों डिपार्टमेंट मेरे पास ही हैं। हम एक अच्छा काम अभी करने जा रहे हैं। जो जयपुर के भिखारी हैं, राजस्थान, उनके भिखारियों के लिए स्पेशल कोर्स हम शुरू करने जा रहे हैं और आपसे अपेक्षा करेंगे कि किसी भिखारी को जिसको हमने ट्रेनिंग दिया है उसको हम आपके यहाँ किसी व्यक्ति में नौकरी लगा कराएं। एक दूसरा, ट्रांसजेंडर्स के लिए हम कोर्स शुरू करने जा रहे हैं। वो पहले ताली बजा के मांग लेते थे, घर चले जाते थे, चौराहों पर मांग लेते थे, अब वो सब बंद हो गया। तो वो जो एक समाज का एक ऐसा हिस्सा है ट्रांसजेंडर्स, तो वो क्या करेगा, वो जाएगा कहाँ? उसके लिए भी हम कोर्स चला रहे हैं ताकि वो मुख्य धारा में आ जाए। वो ताली पीटने वाला काम तो हो नहीं पाएगा, वो गार्ड का, वेल्डर का, फिटर का, जो भी जो नॉर्मल आदमी करता है वो भी इंसान है, तो उसको भी हम ये बिल्कुल जो नई चीज़ें हैं वो भी करने जा रहे हैं। इसकी 17 तारीख को हम शुरुआत करेंगे, कल ही 17 है, इसको जल्दी आपके सामने आएंगे। ऐसे कुछ सुझाव अगर आपके पास हो, हमारा जो RSLDC है, हमारे पास स्किल सेट को डेवलप करने के लिए रीस्किलिंग, आप स्किलिंग के लिए पैसा है, आप चाहें तो हम जोड़ करके इसको कर सकते हैं।
Thank you, sir. Thank you for sharing the various initiatives led by you, and especially जो आपके नए initiatives हैं regarding this transgenders and beggars, ये really commendable है। मेरे ख्याल से दूसरे states भी इससे सीख सकते हैं और उदाहरण ले सकते हैं। तो हम जैसा करते रहे, आपके साथ सहयोग से काम करते रहेंगे, and will act as an interface between you and the industry. Thank you very much for your address. Now, as mentioned, Mr. Pednekar would be joining in the next session because he had a meeting in the morning, and we come to close of the inaugural session. And I would once again thank all the speakers for their presence, time, inputs, especially Dr. Pawan, albeit some voice constraint, but we got his idea and perspective. Thank you, sir. Look forward to have you amongst us more often. And also to Mr. Siddiqui, Mr. Yadav, Mr. Kr Shankar, who is there with us for the first time. And now we move to our next session, that is changing role of HR leading through crisis. This session is being moderated by Dr. Akhil Busrai, who is CEO of Akhil Busrai Consulting, and he is former Executive Director HR of IBM, and he is also an authority on the subject. So I would request Dr. Busrai to please take charge of the session. The speakers for the inaugural session may stay back, or if they want, they can log off also. Thank you for your presence. Over to you, Mr. Busrai, please.
Thank you very much, Atul, and greetings to all. The previous session was an outstanding one, outstanding from the sense that it was very contemporary. Siddiqui Bhai, Kr Shankar, and also Vaishali, they spoke something very relevant. So our session is going to be focusing on the HR challenges that are going to be coming in the coming years post-COVID. And I have some distinguished speakers with me, Dr. Shilpa Kabra Maheshwari from Siemens, very outstanding lady. She has done some very seminal work with Siemens, especially in diversity and inclusiveness. And Prashant Deshpande from Reliance, state-of-art automation expert and very renowned, I would say, proponent of bringing automation and digital world forward. We also have Mukund Nair, very intellectual person, if I can say so, who will be talking to us about skilling. And we might be honored to have Mr. Pandekar join us since he missed the first session. I don't know if he's there on the line. Are you there, sir, on the line? Okay, we'll carry on. So let me share four thoughts with you. And Dr. Vaishali Dongre referred to it in brief. I feel post-COVID, the whole mantra will be more for less from the business. They will be struggling to revive business, recover the losses made during the previous period. Almost 1 year now, we do not know whether how long will it take for business to come back to what is the previous shape. So the demand from the business and the organization to the HR will be more for less. And when that demand comes, costs will drive a lot of decision making, and HR will have to understand and make sure that cost does not drive quality and dealings with the employees to the extent that they are shortchanged. And this is not just theoretical statement. This is going to be a real challenge for HR. As a result of that, certain three things that HR, and among plethora of things, I only want to focus on three things. The standard job description that we have today in a very neat organization chart with boxes reporting to boxes will disappear, in my opinion. Jobs will be fluid, organizations will be fluid, jobs will be interchangeable and swappable. Multi-skilling, multi-job slots will come in, which where one person was doing one work will be required to do something else together. So earlier we had a separate slot for purchasing, separate slot for procurement, and this type of models will disappear, certainly in my opinion, and people will be asked to do double task, or three people's job will be done by two people, which means sharing of workload and work responsibilities. As a result of this fluid organization, one thing that will come out very clearly is that people will need to be skilled, not theoretically skilled. They have to be taught new skills to do work outside their familiar area. So going and starting now, in fact, already many good organizations have started proactively, that moving forward, the responsibility of HR will not be just to skill training, a set calendar that we are doing this skilling, reskilling, but it has to be tuned with the business requirement. And as a result of that, one thing that HR will have to do, and for which many of us are blamed that we do not do it often right now, is understand business. Many HR people can talk of PAT, PBT, CAGR to the last decimal point, but many HR people miss out what is it that the business head loses his or her sleep over. So HR will have to now buck up, understand the nuances of the business, where business is shaping up, where the market is shaping up, where competition is shaping up, and proactively prepare business's readiness to meet those changing times with reskilling employees. Good news for HR is there'll be a lot of pull factor by the employees. They will want to be reskilled. And that's where people like Nair and all will talk about that there will be a need felt by the employees to reskill. And one byproduct of this, as I foresee, is that the role of the unions will get marginalized. The bargaining power will get reduced. People will depend more on reskilling themselves to sustain a job, retain a job, grow in the job, rather than the bargaining power of the union. Now, this means a responsibility for HR to make sure that they become advocacy of the employees. And they do not exploit the situation, because unions in some cases will lose that bargaining power, because job protection will move from union negotiation to reskilling. And that is an important shift from the culture point of view, the push and pull. And the last point is the culture part. I put culture as a very big picture, but the type of work that will be done will not be done by permanent employees. And many speakers have spoken on it, so I'll not repeat that. But we thought that gig workers was only for the big multinational companies and big organizations and IT and all those fancy things. It will not affect us on day-to-day normal working life. I think that's a myth. Short-term assignments, do your work and go away, will happen. Now, this means that HR will have to take the responsibility how workers and employees will not be exploited. And I'm being very candid on this forum. There'll be a tendency to exploit, take advantage, and HR will have to take that responsibility, ethical responsibility of the profession, to be the employee advocacy role to the hilt. And I mean this very seriously, because it's very convenient to have gig workers, temporary workers, short-term contract, and now with the new code, fixed-term contract will become almost legitimized, not almost, it will become legitimized. How do we have internal controls and ethical view of looking at employees will be the HR responsibility. It's all very easy to say on a FICCI forum like this, but HR will have to roll up their sleeves and find ways and means of ensuring that this happens. And the last part is the reward and recognition and growth and measurement criteria. And Vaishali referred to this very nicely in the beginning, that the performance criteria will not be same, because the tenure of job, tenure of projects, the multi-skilling, multi-people working on the same project will require us to revisit our performance. I will not go into details of that, but the bottom line of my presentation and my thought process is that HR will have to come out of its comfort zone, what we have done, because our rule book says like this, we have done this for last 5 years, 10 years, we got awarded for it, we became famous for it. All those things will have to go out. We'll have to relearn. HR will have to relearn how to do HR. And I mean this with a lot of seriousness, that we'll have to revisit ourselves rather than preach to the world how to redo the work and all that. All this talk about employee engagement and sending dry ration to employees, etc., was good in a particular time frame. That is behind us. Going forward, connect with business, make sure that the business is made stronger to revive itself, and that the people's solution becomes a strong foundation for business revival. So I will end here, and Dr. Shilpa Kabra Maheshwari, if you would like to go next, ma'am. Shilpa, are you there? Yeah, I can see you there. You are on mute, Shilpa. Shilpa, are you there? Okay, Mukund, since you're on the line, I can see you smiling with your long, lovely hairstyle. Is that post-COVID or you normally keep it that way?
No, this is a COVID effect. I haven't cut my hair.
COVID effect. Okay, over to you, Mukund. And you're talking about a nice word called learnability.
Learnability.
Okay, so please go ahead, sir.
Let me just share my screen. Can you see my presentation?
Oh, yes, very clear, Mukund.
Great.
That's very nice.
All right. So thank you, Dr. Akhil, and thank you, FICCI, for this opportunity. You couldn't have set it up more perfectly for me, Dr. Akhil, by talking about agility in business and how multi-skilling is so important. That's pretty much the theme of my talk today. So let me just dive right in and give a little bit of coming in from a tech background and into L&D, at least when I came in, and that's what I saw, is that typically a well-run L&D function, right, would look at this and say, hey, I need to be very close to business. I need to identify what are the skill gaps, ask business, hey, what do you need, right? Once we have that, build a nice collaborative strategy around it. And if you're really mature, right, we will have very good measurement metrics around it to say that you asked for this and we delivered this, see, we are successful, right? But the truth of the matter is, while we are doing all of this, right, it's not working. If we were to put our hand to our heart, we know it's not working. And why is that, right? One, our people are expressing resistance to directives, right? They really are not appreciating where we as an organization would come and say, do this, this, and this is good for you, right? Business is saying, why is it that this learning is going on at the cost of my work? This should happen before the person comes in, or maybe in parallel to the work, but not really at the cost of my work, right? The organization has certain aspirations the individual has, right? If you're in the tech field, it's everybody wants to do machine learning, right? But that's not the only type of work you do. There's a wide variety of work that is out there. How do you match the organization, the learning aspiration, this where you are being very prescriptive with people? From a content perspective, again, if you're looking at training and you're saying, oh, let's get everybody into a room, it's not working. There's a paradigm shift, right? And thankfully, I think one of the few good things out of COVID is at least the myths around the only way people will learn is by sitting in a classroom. All of those have sort of disappeared. So, but There are different ways that people want to learn. The demand on people is increasing, and this is what so Dr. Akhil was referring to, right? It's not really about come do your X job, right? It's about what more can you do? Can you take on this role also? Why do we need 3 people here when one could do, right? In our tech field, we used to have, there's a developer, there's a QA, there's a business analyst, there's a project manager, there's a UX designer, there's a visual designer, and now this is one person's job, right? This is the expectation. Why is it that we need these 8 people to come collaborate, and instead of collaborate, create a mess, and then we have a QA come and fix it, right? So that's changing, right? And then the most critical, I think, in all of this is expertise is now temporary. Before it was really about, I have done 15 years of this. That's the strength that I bring in. Now, unfortunately, after 2 years, that skill itself is irrelevant, right? So in this sort of a scenario, all that we are trying to do is still go and talk to business and say, hey, what do you want? We will do it for you. And by the time we do it, we realize it's not relevant. And this vicious loop is just continuously going on. So at least my response to this, and what I would strongly encourage each one of us to think about is, what we need is to move away from a strategic skilling mindset to a mindset that within the organization, what we need to create is a learning mindset. It's not about skills, it's about building that mindset. And I'll talk a little bit about what that means for me, right? There's a lot of talk about, self-driven culture of learning. And I think most of the time you'll hear us in L&D complain that people don't learn. And the reason why that is so is because we are focusing it on self-driven. I think what we need to focus on is aspiration-driven culture of learning. What is it that the person wants to learn? And once, as Dr. Akhil was mentioning, people are now feeling this need that they need to be relevant, they need to skill, right? But they are smart, right? If you're hiring smart people, they know what's happening in the market. They know that for their survival, for thriving, they need to reskill. So you don't need to tell them what to learn. What you need to do is create a learning marketplace, right? You need to give a plethora of options with all different learning styles incorporated, right? And as an organization, your job is to give signals, not mandates, guidance, right? This is hot. This is important. This is something maybe that we would think would work well for you, right? And give people the freedom to experiment in this. And just the encouragement shouldn't be learn this skill or learn that skill. It should be cross skill, upskill. That is the future. Your smart people will take up the cues. They are the ones who will survive, right? And while they will be doing this, they'll be happy to contribute. They'll be happy to share back their knowledge. And you don't need to go outside of the organization. Your internal crowdsourced content, which is curated from the best content out there available, most of it freely available, is how it would work, right? So promote an aspiration driven culture of learning where people have the freedom to choose their learning path, right? Don't mandate paths. Some people prefer self-learning, some prefer instructor-led, some would want a more hands-on style, which is probably the most effective. And some people just say that, hey, all I need is either guidance on this is what I should learn, or if I'm stuck, somebody helps me out, right? Blend all of these styles into your marketplace. It's really important, right? But all of this, like employee satisfaction is a great metric, sure. But as an organization, what are we looking at? We are looking at making our people future ready. We are looking at being quickly able to respond to the skills demand, right? So learning and development should actually be lead, learning, evaluation and development, right? And that is where you need to keep your focus on. You need to build these evaluations. You need to encourage people to take these evaluations, but not to look at those as pass or fail, right? You need to create a safe space where they can take it. For example, in our organization, if you get a badge, the entire world knows about it. If you don't, you are the person who gets to know about it. And what you get to know is a learning plan that, hey, why don't you try again with this and then again? So use the evaluations as a way of learning rather than as a way of penalty. And once you have that, people will be willing to experiment. They will look at this as a more of a continuous journey, right? And in this evaluation, encourage the multi-skilling, right? Gamify this. In our case, we build these badges and we build these as hexagons. And we said the beehive is infinite, right? You can just keep creating it. So that's how you should sort of look at your overall gamification. And once you do that, at least we had a mandate-driven culture. And when we moved to this, our learning numbers shot up much more than the mandates after we made this sort of a shift, right? This is hygiene now. It needs to be anytime, anywhere, any device. So I won't spend too much time on this. But this, and again, Dr. Akhil's this thing, I want to sort of focus on this. Before it was I-shaped skill sets, right? It was all about depth. Then we started talking about, hey, it needs to be more than depth. It needs to be T-shaped, right? You need to have breadth and a layer of depth. Now the reality is you need breadth-shaped skill sets. You need depth in multiple topics. It can't be just depth in a single topic, and you need breadth across a multi. And as L&D, it's our job to create this ecosystem. Don't solve a business problem. Create this ecosystem where there is learn agility. And when I say learn agility, what is it? It is this learning mindset. It is this extremely quick responsiveness to new needs, with this curiosity to try things, right? And what you are trying to embed through the organization is an approach to learning rather than learning plans.
Very good.
People need to really look at this and say, if I were to say to this person, instead of this skill today, you have to learn this, how quickly and how effectively will that happen? And that is the only metric which is important on the learning side. And this is where I think we really need to focus on. And if you do a good job at this, you would have really thriving organizations. So
thank you, Mukund.
These are my thoughts, and thank you so much for the opportunity.
Mukund, you brought in a very refreshing perspective, and you know what you spoke today is the mindset of young people like you. So all this gray head and people with no hair speaking earlier, they are talking prehistoric. And what I found refreshing is that you're talking the language that this generation of people we are managing are likely to manage in future. One question, Mukund, you talked about machine learning and, you know, plethora of options should be available to people. Now, this is all right for big organizations with resources. Small and medium-sized organizations are also to be looked at. What is your response? How do they manage it? They don't have resources of the type to have plethora of training options and things available. Cost and ability is a consideration. What is your advice to those organizations?
See, I would say from a challenge perspective, they're facing the same challenge, right? Today, if they're working on a particular skill, the clients are changing, right? So at least the first thing to do is to get your hiring right then, right? Is to look at people, do they have the willingness to learn, right? Do they really, are they, again, the typical performance versus potential, right? There needs to be a good focus on potential, right? And then you would want to still, right? If you push this, right, today, if the person is smart, they will go out, right? So you need to really look at what their interests are and see if you can match this. It's not that we are also able to give it to every single individual,
my
but
question
the
was
better your
around
matching is.
How do these companies manage cost of all these things?
So I'll be honest, there is, from a content perspective, I don't think you have to spend a rupee today.
Is it? Okay.
Yeah, you have pretty much, you go to Khan Academy, top class content. You go to the MOOCs, right? All the massive open top, like Coursera, if you don't need a certification, right? If you don't want that certification, you just want to do the course, it's free.
It's free, almost
so
free.
There is, I think that content, that the democratization of content has been long available, right?
Okay.
Now it's more about
I think
exclusivity of content.
You touched upon an iceberg. Would you be willing to advise some companies if they approach FICCI for your advice in future? I mean, would you find...
Happy to help. Okay. It's been a very interesting
so
journey
I'll
the
ask
past few years.
Rahul and Atul to make a note, because it's people like you who should be tapped to scratch the surface of how to do it for other companies and replicate. Thank you very much, Mukund. It was very refreshing and I would say very committed. You could make out your enthusiasm is coming from within. Obviously, you have done it and been there. And a very good word to learn agility is a very good word I've learned. Thank you very much, sir. So Prashant, can I go over to you, sir?
Hi, Akhil. Good afternoon.
Hi, how are you? Good to see you.
Good. If you may permit, can I step in before Prashant?
Okay, Shilpa. You know, you are using your
No
diversity
issues.
card. You are using your diversity card very well. So, Prashant, we will allow her to go first. Okay.
No, perfectly fine. I am perfectly fine with it.
Okay, Shilpa, over to you. Okay, Shilpa.
Thanks,
Go ahead.
Thank you. First of all, thank you, FICCI, for this opportunity, and thank you, Akhil, for being a great, anchor of this whole process. And of course, your thoughts are always very refreshing and very binding. So quickly coming on, and I know Mukund has spoken about a new age thought around learning, but quickly coming on, how do you prepare for the new normal, right? And over the last 1 year, we've all seen the pandemic impact us, the challenge which have, come across organizations, something which none of us knew. It's all so unknown, so uncertain. All our crisis plans, all our business case scenarios have gone in for a toss. It's not only an HR problem, but every CEO, every leader, every stakeholder in the company probably has been hit by this much more than ever thought of, right? Given this situation, given this scenario, I think the onus on HR becomes tremendously higher. Because we are anchors for the organization, and when I say anchors, we are probably people who can trigger that thought, because business will focus on business, but how do you anticipate the changing scenario, the changing landscape from a people perspective? And at the end of it, whatever we may say, people will make a difference. Either they will take us forward or they will take us behind, right? So a couple of things, and I am sure some of these things are also known to us, but a couple of things in terms of preparing for the new normal. One is fundamentally, what do we mean by new normal, right? And most of us think new normal is post-COVID. When the vaccination will come in, things will become better. Probably some of the organizations will have people working from home. But I think in my view, the new normal is a much bigger landscape and a much bigger game plan, right? It's all about how digital will pervade our life. It's all about how business models will evolve in a more agile way, how our customer responses will change, right? And we've seen over the last 9 to 10 months, how sales can happen sitting out of offices from home, right? Earlier we would say, unless we don't have a customer interaction, you can't do a conversion, right? You can't make a pitch if you are, not meeting the customer, or we would wait out of the customer's offices for 3 hours, 4 hours for an important meeting for 30 minutes. But all that landscape has changed, right? So first, primarily, we are in the business of delivering to the customer, right? So the whole customer orientation, the whole customer impact will change. That's the first, to me, the new normal change. The second is in terms of the way our talent is spread across, right? And today we've all learned, more so in manufacturing industry, we would always say, it's just not possible to work from home. And when as HR, we would define those policies, we would say it's an IT prerogative, you can't do it. But today, everybody's turned around and said that's possible, right? You will still have a hybrid mechanism in organization. So the notion of talent and the diversification of talent and the availability of talent in geographies, will no longer matter. Given that the entire talent landscape is changing, and the gig economy is going to come in a big time, right? You're going to get more flexible and variable workforce. And that's going to be a business need for tomorrow, right? How quickly can you onboard talent and how quickly can you offload with talent? Whether it's the blue collar, whether it's the white collar, I think businesses will be more variable. That would be the second changing paradigm in terms of the new normal. The third changing paradigm is with the impact of technology, right? And the whole digital is becoming more deeper. And India is already in that direction moving. How will it kind of, influence the way we are able to deliver our products or portfolios, right? From a customer side, how quick and agile are we to be able to learn, adapt, and come to the market, right? The delivery time to market will need to be considerably cruxed, and will get cruxed. It's who is in the game ahead will matter, right? Innovation lead times are going down, right? Customer want things as of yesterday. Remote management is increasing. So that's the agility and the whole growth mindset, right? And some of it, Mukund also alluded to it. How do you bring in that growth mindset within organizations to get this whole landscape going? And the fourth most important point is change, right? How do we embrace change? Because change will not go away. We always used to say the only constant is change, but I think that's now historic, I think change is the only new normal, right? Everything will constantly change. Given these 4 fundamental paradigms as HR, what do we do, right? How do we prepare the business? Couple of things. I mean, the most important is anything starts from the top, right? It's important to start preparing the leadership. And in current time, we've seen leaders who couldn't survive the crisis, have really not been able to help organizations get through. Leaders who have really stood the ground, even when they didn't have answers, within companies, they've been able to manage to bear the impact of Corona. So one, leadership. And leadership will need more humility, will need more empathy, right? Will need the ability to understand and anticipate change and react, right? So that is one. How do we as HR enable that is an important question. The second important thing is, how do we engage and communicate with our employees? And we've seen in current times, organizations which have communicated extensively. And when I say communicate, it means over-communicate. That's the new key. If you are transparent and if you are communicating, your last mile employee feels connected and goes extra mile to, stand with the organization. So communication is very important. The third thing as HR is, and it's a big impact on business, how do we gear up creating a fungible and a talent workforce? And again, going back to Mukun's point of an ecosystem, right? Tomorrow's organizations will be networked organizations. These hierarchies will go away. You will pull in resources. You'll have self-organizing, cross-functional teams to quickly come together, deliver on a product, disintegrate. You will pull in resources from the market. When you have AI specialists, you have solution architects, you have digital experts, right? All that talent will not be available within an organization. You will need to rely on ecosystem. So how does an organization create its own interface to the external and internal ecosystem and create an environment to be able to allow the talent to deliver is going to be an important aspect. And as HR, my belief is, we will need to move from a controlling, a policy-driven, a governance role to a more enabler or facilitator role, right? How do we enable? How do we let go of our controls and create that kind of culture? That's going to be very important. And finally, the whole experience we have within the organization, right? Right when you step in, the touch points, the environment, the workspace, the way we interact, people are going to look for more empowerment, right? And leadership will need to drive empowerment. Leadership will need to drive, outcomes based on trust and not on FaceTime, right? How do we create that experience? How as HR do we start orienting our leaders to the fact that, I don't need to see you in face. I don't need to be in office for 4 hours, 15 minutes, but I can still deliver if I need to deliver. I think there's a lot of trust which will need to get built into the whole ecosystem, right? And organizations will need to evolve. And going back to Akhil, your question, it's not about small or big. I think the DNA of organizations need to evolve, right? The whole philosophy that we don't control people or we don't control products, right? We have to create an environment which is self-sustaining. Those are going to be the key and very crucial elements. How do we get all this going together? I know it's easy to say, empower your people or build that trust, build that leadership, but how do you get that going? I think 3 or 4 important things. One, is HR evolving, right? Are we ourselves evolving? To me, that's the starting point, right? Do we still believe that I need to bring in a leave policy, or do I, which is, based on number of days or based on encashment, etc., etc. How do we evolve to say, can we look and allow our employees to pull in their leaves when they need to while they continue to deliver? That's the important point. Second important point, do we ourselves understand digital and the environment which is changing, right? Are we investing in ourselves? Because most of the time, HR itself doesn't understand data analytics. We don't use data to make decisions. We don't understand, we are stuck to old competency frameworks for leadership, right? Drawn out of multiple frameworks, but everything is evolving and adapting. And, for concepts like assessments on a traditional leadership framework will probably no longer be the norm. So as HR, we need to be more proactive and start thinking in the direction of how do we adapt. Only if we adapt and build our own competence can we lead the business, right? Can we handle the business? Third important thing is the trust, right? HR needs to build that trust with the CEO and the CFO to be able to deliver. And you can build trust when you have your own competence and when you understand the context and you understand the entire talent landscape, right? We can't give half-cooked solutions which will not be facilitative either for the business or for the employee or for the talent which is there. But unless there is a trust collaborative relationship between HR and the stakeholders, I think there is no buy-in, or there is no way that either HR can deliver or the leadership can take advantage of HR's usefulness. And finally, the most important thing, I think, as HR, we ourselves need to embrace diversity, right? Because as we go forward, you'll have millennials, you have external talent I spoke about. The gig economy will come in a bigger way, right? How do you embrace that to say we are going to become a more inclusive organization, right? Are your policies inclusive, right? Is your thought process inclusive? Does your leadership demonstrate that? Are you working with your leadership to build that kind of thought process within the organization? And having said that, of course, all this will be enabled by technology. So that goes without saying, right? Are we proactive and do we understand the need to become more digital? It's extremely important. So I think these are some of the things, preparing for the new normal.
Very well said.
Is going to evolve, and I think that's important for all of us to know.
Shilpa, what you've done in last few minutes, 6-7 minutes, actually almost a content of a book, and I'm not exaggerating, because you covered in brief main things that will touch us. I have 2 questions for you, Shilpa. One, we've seen this during the work from home period. One good thing that happened, and as a diversity believer myself, that the playing field for men and women became equal. All this myth about women cannot do this, they have different priorities, they can't spend longer time, all this is gone. And now people look at women as an equal contributor as men. Now, having said this, do you think that going forward this trend of towards diversity will continue, or what will bring us back to the old game?
Akhil, I mean, it's a good question, and I would take that one step ahead. I would say women have become even more contributors rather than equal contributors, because we've seen that women during these times have had to not only balance work, balance kids, balance, the whole socio-psycho well-being of the family and themselves, and right. So I would say they've actually become more contributors on the lighter side. But I think diversity will evolve. And today the whole focus around diversity is more on gender diversity in the industry, right? To be very honest. Diversity will evolve to include, young talent. Diversity will evolve to include geographically distributed talent. Diversity will involve to include partners in the ecosystem, like, let's say, more academicians, more researchers. But the shape and the nature of diversity will evolve. Gender will be important. I don't deny that fact. But there's no going back, right? I mean, it's only going to evolve in a much more stronger way than it is currently.
Thank you, Shilpa. I think we have lost Mr. Busrai, some connection problem.
Okay.
So thank you for your address. And while he logs in again, I would request Dr. Prashant Deshpande, Vice President HR Strategy and Planning, Reliance Industries Limited, for his address. Over to you, Prashant.
Thank you very much. First of all, thank you to FICCI and Rahul for giving me the opportunity to address and be part of this wonderful event full of very experienced and very, very well-known HR professionals. And my address is going to be more about the experience as a professional and as an individual I had since this great transition, if we can say, started from March 2020 when the lockdown started. So the work from home is not a new idea. It was not invented after the lockdown was started. Always it was there in the mind, in the conscious of the thinkers and management scholars, technologists, and generally it was certainly it was part of our collective imagination, I would say. It was the way human beings typically worked before the industrial revolution began, because most of the artisans worked from home. That was the natural work setting. The industrialization created the modern workplace. Similarly, the in parallel to the factory, the office was invented. Office is also a modern construction, and we got so used to both these ways of working. Either you work in factory or you work in the office, that somewhere we forgot that for millennia, lot of people work from home or fields near home. So we are again, thanks to the circumstances, the force of circumstances, we are reverting to that mode of working which is closer to our place of dwelling. What has happened, and it is well known fact, that work from home as an opportunity, though it was a necessity, as an opportunity, it became available to a small subset of the workers in the workforce because of the nature of work that we do. Like I am speaking right now, all the speakers are speaking, we are working. So our way of working, if it doesn't involve much of manual effort or contact time with the service consumers, or manipulation of the physical things which require sophisticated industrial setting or tools, then we the knowledge workers, largely we can say knowledge workers, though not all knowledge workers also had this luxury of working from home. For example, say doctors, they are knowledge workers, but many of them had to work in a very, very difficult environment, very challenging, risky environment, had to work. But a lot of knowledge workers got this opportunity to work from home. Others were not so fortunate. Either they had to lose their job, they had to face dislocation, or they had to risk their health, and they had to continue to be on the frontiers. We valorize them, but that didn't reduce necessarily their pain. So this is the larger context in which this work from home has unfolded. So it was a trend with technology growth, with improvement in the connectivity, reduction of the connectivity prices, a trend to which immensely the company that I work for, that is Reliance, contributed, spread of connectivity and reduction of the prices. So because of that, the drive towards the work from home was very much there. What it did, this crisis, was just it accelerated that trend. What would have happened anyways after 3 to 5 years, that got preponed, and there was this kind of no option. There was a TINA factor. There is no alternative. So due to which all of us came and started working. So as HR, what we faced is we had to have a lot of enabling mechanisms. First of all, lot of us had not worked on a regular basis from home. Like we had done some complementary work. All of us had experience of working sometime from home. Like we were working most of the time from office, and some additional work we used to do often from home as per the as needed. But full-time working from home, none of us were trained, and it's a skill. So first thing what we did is we made it mandatory in Reliance across all businesses that each employee must take a training, mandatory training, how to work from home. And there was a sense of urgency, sense of fear also among employees. So certain initiatives like this, which otherwise would not have easily got response, quickly got response. Everyone got trained. Everyone took those learning initiatives seriously. Subsequently, our own infrastructure, tech infrastructure was not fully ready. It was somewhere in the making, but we accelerated the development of those tools, and we launched 73 services on a suite of applications, mobile applications, cloud first mobile applications, 73 applications, which cover all the employee service delivery needs as such. Whatever you could do on your intranet of the company, we said you should be able to do seamlessly on the mobile with same or better experience. Again, that took a while. First 1 or 2 months, certain applications were not so stable. They got some time to stabilize. There was some teething problem, but there was this need due to which development team also pushed, everyone pushed, and things got stabilized. And now it is working seamlessly. For past few months, I have not visited even our intranet on my laptop. Most of it I do from mobile. So this is one side of it, the employee applications, collaborative applications. This is my professional experience. There is other experience, which is as a volunteer. When this thing was happening and the society was getting impacted, I had a desire to contribute something. So I got involved in one social impact initiative called Mo Sahay. It's an initiative in which IIT faculty are partnering, IIT students are there, a lot of other students are there, creating a phygital platform, not fully digital, a phygital platform for placing back the migrant workers and helping them through their all the life cycle needs, not just placing them, but helping them to have, if there are any finance needs, arranging them, travel needs, arranging them. So all that was necessary. So participated in that initiative, and there I noticed that the earliest opportunities which came were in the construction economy. Said that there is a need, but there were practically placing people in construction was very difficult through that because of the variety of issues, the contractor ecosystem, and the contractors themselves had flight. They had disappeared. The employers did not have direct connect with the workers. So all those issues created problems. But the gig economy, the warehouse workers, as the Diwali approached, lockdown got lifted, a lot of opportunities came in the warehouse workers, and we placed in that, through that initiative, through that platform, multiple people, lot of people we placed, hundreds of people we placed in the warehouses, in the gig economy. There also, what we figured out is the connect of HR with the gig workers to these workers was very little. When they had lot of difficulties, some of them had even the difficulty of having food available. There was a lockdown in Bangalore and there was accessibility of food. HR was not proactive of a well-known company which has raked billions of dollars, which has valuation of billions of dollars. The HR of the organization, and I'm saying that on this public forum, that this our experience was that, and that's what Dr. Busrai what it said, that somewhere we had lost the heart to help employees. So that role we need to really reinvent. So these are some of the experiences, personal experiences I have experienced as a professional and as a social volunteer. So I'm willing to engage in conversation and have any more questions.
Prashant, I like the way you personalize the experience. And, one question, is HR going to be a help desk type of function? From your talk, it looks like, people don't have food, so ring up HR. Are you anticipating that HR will become a help desk function?
HR should have ability. Administrative expert was one of the core competencies, one of the core part of Dave Ulrich's 4 roles for HR. And that competency was tested to its hilt in this crisis.
Very true.
And unfortunately, we had lost the emphasis focus on crisis management. See, for example, risk management, crisis management, like our operation colleagues, our colleagues in sales, our colleagues in finance, they had taken these things very seriously. Whereas HR, we had not developed those capabilities, those infrastructures, and that's why we struggled. Had we, the company like Reliance, there was absolutely, it was very seamless transition. We supported our employees extremely well because of the capabilities we have. Not all companies could do that.
You highlighted something very nicely, that we have grown up as a function in this crisis. We have come to age. In many ways, CEOs were always appreciating the role of HR, but now they feel that it's an integral part of business. So something that a crisis had to wake us up to our professional requirement. Shilpa, if you are still online, I have one more question, ma'am, and or maybe Mukund, you can answer, or Prashant, you can chip in. All this talk, one point that comes up, that we must teach our senior leaders empathy, not teach, but make them aware of empathy. Mukund, do you feel that all this talk will make leaders very soft, and they will lose that edge to lead people and become all softy stuff?
Yeah, I don't think so. I think empathy doesn't mean given. I think empathy means understanding the viewpoint of the other side and trying to come up with what makes the best possible solution for all parties, right?
Excellent.
It doesn't really mean just given. And I think that's what people need to understand. A lot of times the lack of definitional understanding, which is what gets people to not embrace it. And I think if people focus on this aspect of listening and trying to understand the other person's viewpoint, most of the battle is won.
Okay. So, Shilpa, if you're online, you are included. Prashant, in 4 words, can you define what the HR mantra should be in going future? 4 words.
So, Akhil, sorry, I'll go again first.
You are there.
Not
ahead,
specific card, but yes. So I would say 4 words: connect, communicate, change, and have confidence in driving this change.
Wow. Shilpa, you're ready to write a book now. I think you should call it Connect, Change. What is the 4 C's? Connect,
communicate, change, and confidence to drive that change. Yeah.
Mukund, have you heard her clearly? What is your 4 word, Mukund?
Not 4 words, but a statement of 4 words. Be proactive, not reactive.
Be proactive, no. Excellent. Because at the time, like Shilpa mentioned, one of the days of just serving what people ask for. Prashant, what's your mantra?
Serve and rise to occasions.
Serve. Very good start word. Serve. forget the entitlement concept that we had, this mindset that we are entitled to many things. We must get a seat on the table. First serve, everything will fall in place. So in the interest of time, I'll end up exactly. Atul, we are on time, sir. And Mr. Pednekar to join us. I don't know whether he's there, but Mr. Pednekar was to join us. But
he is still held up with the meeting. Let's hope he joins later during the session.
Is Mr. Pednekar an HR person?
No, he's a IAS officer in charge of the Rajasthan State Industrial Development Corporation.
But I hope he doesn't take HR very lightly. I hope.
No. It's all about people management everywhere.
No, I'm just give our regards to him, and thank you very much, Vijay Shetty. Good to see you, sir. How are you? Thank you, Mukund, Prashant, Shilpa. It was a very good, engaging session. And Mukund, I love your hairstyle. So keep it like Jesus Christ. You don't cut it after COVID. Atul, over to you, sir.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Busrai, for such an engaging session and a very interesting discussion with the young HR professionals. They would be equally delighted to share your perspective and exchange ideas with you. Now we have the next session that talks about the future of industrial relations, and we have Dr. Prabhat Pankaj, who is Director of Jaipur Institute of Management, who will be moderating that session. So without taking any time, I would request Dr. Pankaj to please take charge of the session and proceed. Over to you, Dr. Pankaj.
Thank you, Atulji. First of all, very good morning, each one of you. And it was really pleasure right from the morning. I was listening to all the speakers. It's really such a pleasure to see Dr. Akhil Busrai once again. Sir, you came to our campus and we had a lot of occasions to interact with you. You are such a wonderful, and you made things so simple and so hilarious sometimes, and some and deep meaning, you know. So that's the way forward, actually.
Thank you.
When we heard about all the speakers in the morning, they talked about different dimensions of HR, and we have a very distinguished panel today to talk about IR. So there are 4 agenda of this session. One is talking about new labor codes. I'm not an expert in that, so probably I'll be more of a listener on this aspect of new labor codes. And then we are also going to throw some light on inclusive work environment, which is very important, and a lot of thought has already gone into it. Journey from industrial relations to the employee relations. So what is the future of IR? So that's the major question that everybody would like to talk about. And there are many developments that has happened over time, and the pandemic had changed so much. So, you know, questioning the future of IR, what is going to happen? What is in the future? What is in the offering in the future? And the last dimension that this session is going to throw light on is the strengthening of the social dialogue. And these are very interrelated and very important aspects that we are going to talk about. Wellness is the key thing that has come up very well in all the speakers, those who have given their views on different dimensions, right from the morning till this session. And there are 3 distinct, things that has come up as far as the role of wellness is concerned, because it has empathy, it has innovations. Somebody was saying that by 2025, if you don't innovate and if you don't learn to empathize, you don't focus on wellness and happiness, you're going to die. So, that's the very outrageous statement that has been made. And it has got lessons for whether you are going to modernize, whether you are going to build trust, whether you're going to demonstrate value. So these are the key 3 dimensions on which the entire innovation and the wellness framework is going to evolve. Why this is happening is because, we can see that many companies have actually started coming up with rewards and penalties to achieve good health. This is one aspect that is a new trend, and there are health goals that has also been finalized. In our own humble way in my institution, we have also set the performance, one of the parameter of performance goal as to achieve good health, and the employees are asked to declare their health goals, and then we are trying to see how they are doing on those health goals. That's one very important aspect. That is second trend which makes the discussion on IR very relevant today is the legal profession disruption. So with the development of tech, digital, AI, is the legal profession going to see the disruption? So if legal profession is going to see the disruption, then naturally is going to affect the industrial relations in many ways. And last is the flexible working relationship that is evolving. So what is the nature of work that is going to we are going to see in the future? We are seeing a rise of self-employment. We are also seeing the freelancing in the workplace. We are also looking at the gig workers, or the gig economy, which is going to end. There is one prediction which says that 1 of 5 workers are going to be a gig worker in next 5 to 10 years down the line. So white collar jobs, if you look at today, it has all gone online because of the digital revolutions. Collective bargaining, what is going to happen to the collective bargaining in the wake of all these kind of development? What is the future of unions? How the relationship between the employer and the employee is going to stay? And more importantly, how they are going to connect with the larger society and make some meaning out of it. So, a lot of these dimensions are the subject matter of this panel discussion. I have the pleasure of welcoming all the speakers in this panel discussion. First of all, we have Mr. Bijay Sethi. So welcome, sir, to this distinguished panel. And from FICCI, FICCI's on behalf of FICCI and on my behalf, I would like to welcome
Thank you for inviting me. Thank you very much.
Yeah. So Mr. Sethi is the Chief Information Officer. He's the Head Corporate Social Relations and Head Human Resources at Hero Motocorp Limited, the world's largest two-wheeler manufacturing company. We all know he also leads innovation efforts in the company. So over to you, Mr. Sethi. So you will be the first speaker.
Oh.
So the request is that if you can confine to up to 10 minutes.
Sure. Thank you very much. So maybe at the end of around 8.5 minutes, in case I'm going overboard, you can just remind me. I won't mind that part so that we don't overrun. So I just kept a few slides on this. I'll just run through that. Can you see my slides?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. Can you see my slides, please?
Yes, we can. Yes, we can.
It's visible.
Okay, perfect. So let me just first start with thanking you and the entire FICCI team for inviting me for this conclave. I just heard the last part of the earlier one, and I really liked the way the entire discussion. So thank you very much. Also to you and to all the participants and everyone over here. I just want to wish everyone is safe, healthy, and we continue to be safe and well, our families and friends and colleagues and everyone. So as you were rightly saying, we're talking about future of industrial relation. Many of us are aware of new labor codes. A lot of us are working on how do we ensure that our organizations are mitigated from the wage code part of it, what needs to be done. And from the other parts, I think there's some fantastic work which has been done in consolidation of a lot of labor laws and other laws that are there for each one of us, inclusive work environment, industrial relation, and the social dialogue. What I thought, maybe I'll just spend 7-8 minutes and share my thoughts on one of these. So the key question is as to why does one really want to have good ER? Why does one want to have good industrial relations? Why is it important? And as I personally think that it is important for first the white collar and the management to realize that we are all in this together. It is our own. It is in our own interest that we have very good industrial relations, and so anyone in the organization, that is blue collar, white collar, contractor, casuals, everyone has to first realize, and that to my mind is the biggest thing, that once each one of us comes to this agreement that yes, we are all in this together. If the relationships are good, if there's a harmony, then the company would prosper, our families would prosper. But if there are issues, then there could be problems for all of us. And it's not just one segment of the entire organization which will get impacted. So if I was to just look at, one has to go for one good, from relationship perspective, if I have to improve the relationship, I just say it's just one is to start with just one thing. And that one thing to my mind is the ER philosophy of the organization. What do we really want to achieve out of our employee relationships perspective? And I'm focusing more on blue collar workers at this moment as to what do we want to do with them? What is our philosophy? How do we want to treat them? And if we want to treat them in a way, if my ER philosophy is that I want to have harmonious relationship, I don't want to have discords, I don't want to have any issues. And perhaps the most important piece is it's a win-win. I don't want to get into a situation where I want to have an upper hand at all times, or I want someone else to have an upper hand. If my ER philosophy is that, yes, whatever I do, all of us are in this together, and it's a win-win for all. And it's more of a partnership. Once the ER philosophy comes into that, automatically the relationship starts improving. So this, I personally think when you have to improve this relationship, it has to be based on certain tenets. And I'll just say 5 or 6 of them. And if we can really do that from an ER philosophy perspective, I think the industrial relations in any organization would really improve a lot. First is trust. I think the biggest problem that a lot of organizations face today from a industrial relations perspective and not having good ones are because people lack trust. It's not just people within a particular group or management only or workers only or between white collar, blue collar, but there's a huge lack of trust. So the organization needs to really work on certain areas to ensure that the trust really builds up. And what needs to be done? I think the biggest thing to my mind, if we have to build trust, is have an open, honest communication. A lot of time communication fails. A lot of time we tend to hide certain things. We think, why should I tell this guy? If I tell this information, the person could take advantage. It could be either way. And any of the parties could take advantage of, could be thinking from that perspective. So if we have a real honest communication between the two sets, management and the other employees, I think the trust starts building. And then, say, for example, if look at today's time, we know that the entire industry is going through whatever it is going through. And first 3-4 months were really bad. Now some of the companies have started doing well. But when you have a very transparent, honest communication with them that this is what is happening in industry, this is what we are doing for you, this is what we can do, what we can't do, suddenly the other person also starts realizing that, yes, it's not that someone is trying to take advantage of the situation. And that, to my mind, is the biggest point from a trust perspective. And that also is linked to transparency. We can't be really getting into, nahi, maine batana nahi hai, why should I tell this? Can this take person? So if you have transparency, have an open communication, suddenly the trust improves. This really, and as I was getting into the last piece of the earlier conversation also, I saw some discussion on empathy. So one has to look at from an empathy perspective. And I'll give you one example, what we did, for example, around 20th or 19th of March, it was very clear that we could be soon going in for a lockdown. We announced our lockdown on 21st. The government was, I think, on 25th of March. So we knew that the people over there could be facing a lot of issues when there's a lockdown from their financial perspective. So we try to think from their perspective. Many of those guys may not have the kind of savings that some of us may have, which could, and one doesn't know as to what the requirements during this period. So while for a normal salary, for example, is generally given on 7th of the month, next month. So in fact, on 23rd of March, we did give everybody's salary out. And we said that, okay, for the month of March, please, because that's all that. And if that particular one single act really helped us in building a great relationship. And of course, there's a communication which went around and a regular communication with everybody in the organization, with their families. But objective was that when you are taking any action, are you really trying to put yourself into the shoes of the other person and see that how is that person feeling? If I do this, what will that person really think about that? What will be the impact on that person? And that really builds in a good relationship when the other party also realizes that the actions that are being taken are not being taken from a kind of selfish, if I can use that word, interest, but it are being done in my own interest. So the industrial relations automatically start becoming harmonious. And of course, if it has to be fair, we can't be really doing anything which is unfair. So if when I'm dealing with my, say, unions or blue collar workers or others, there has to be a fairness there. And fairness is not something which is just to be spoken or to be seen, but in actions also. It has to be in actions, words, thoughts, everywhere. And that's moment my actions, words, thoughts are fair, the other person's or the other party starts realizing and the relationships start improving. And it has to be collaboration. All of us know that if I have to, in my own factory, I have to make bikes or I have to make scooters, I know I can't do without them. They also know that we can't without us. So it has to be a huge collaboration, because that's where I started with, that all of us are in this together. And if we can work that way, then the industrial relation really becomes so harmonious. But if I have to do this, I have to support this with a couple of things. And I'll just say three of them. One is enhancing the competency. Competency, while we think that we need to enhance competency levels of our blue collar workers, our unions, and that's required because we also need to keep them informed of and updated on what is happening, how they can really help, how they can really analyze as to what is happening in economy, industry, organization. But at the same time, I think there's a huge focus that as organizations, we need to also enhance competency of our ER teams. And why they said, I say that with full humility. How many people are today really wanting to get into ER? You get into colleges, when you recruit, many people want a cushy job. I want to get into compensation benefits. I want to get into talent management, talent development. I want to get into recruitment. But how many of them are really wanting to go onto shop floor and work as HR professionals? How many of them are really wanting to enhance their ER skills as to, for example, we're talking about the labor code just now, that how is it going to really impact each one of us? So I think if we need to really focus, if we have to build a good relationship, I need to focus on enhancing my own competency, the white collar people competency, blue collar competency, the unions, everything. And if you focus on that, suddenly the relationship actually improves. And always go with a positive attitude. So when there are a lot of times this kind of fear, union hai, pata nahi kaise karenge, wo kaisa hoga. I think if we approach any of the relationship with a very positive attitude, the end IR ER harmonious relation will automatically come, and suddenly we'll say that the relationship, the industrial relationship in the organization really is really very nice. And finally, it also has to be a mutual respect. It can't be you versus me. It can't be nahi hum bade hain, hum senior hain, wo aise hain, all those things. I think if we really approach everyone in the organization, whether it is a blue collar worker, whether it's a union, whether it's a manager level person or a leadership level, if we approach each person as a human being, as respect, suddenly the industrial relations from ER to IR, the entire thing actually really changes it. And you really get into that, yes, this is a harmonious place where you are working on it. So I think that's where each one of us really has to work towards to get a great future of industrial relations. And if we can focus on many of those things, suddenly we'll find that it's like any other. So whether I'm working in my IT function, CSR function, or in a IR function, or maybe working with a company which doesn't have an IR issue, all those things suddenly it goes away because the principles remain at all these. At the end of the day, we need to ensure that we work towards that. Since maybe if I have one more minute, I just kept one slide over here just for sake of everyone. So since I saw that word on labor codes, so as of now, there are 4 codes. So I'll just briefly tell. So 4 codes which have come. One is code on wages, industrial relation codes, occupational safety, and the social security. What it actually is doing is that really lot of legislations which had happened over the last many years, they are being combined into a single code, and a lot of actions have been taken to decriminalize many of those things. So today we may not have time, but maybe as one other speaker will get into this, but I just wanted to keep over here. But one thing, one code that each one of us really, from a financial perspective, need to also be very clear is, and start taking actions, is the code on wages, where there's a particular thing that the basic plus DA and other allowances have to be 50% of this. So organizations need to start working on that. So that's what I just wanted to keep it over here to sensitize everyone over here. I thank each one of you for listening to me. Best wishes. Stay safe, stay healthy. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
I
Thank you,
hope
Vijay
I
Sethi ji.
could be in 10 minutes.
Excellent, excellent presentation. You started with one thing that is ER philosophy, and then you started outlining the traits, in fact, of good relationship between employer and employee, blue collar job, and the management. You talked about trust, empathy, fairness, collaboration, positive attitude, respect. You know, if you look at all these from purely its meaning perspective, and how it is implemented, how it works, these are all non-cognitive competencies that you are talking about, basically. A last set of non-cognitive competency. So, would you like to answer this question? If I ask you, how do you think, what are the training need, on both sides to build these competencies? Do you think that there is a training need, and something like, if somebody is experimenting with wellness training, somebody is experimenting with happiness training, somebody is mindfulness training, do you think these are the trainings which are going to help?
See, if I look from the current situation, some of these trainings what you are talking are actually very, very important. Wellness, happiness, laughter yogas, those kind of things, because in any case, there's too much of stress in the system. So that's one, which is a short-term thing from even the current COVID perspective. There's a huge need. But to my mind, while the three things that you are saying, Mr. Pankaj, I think they are required, including mindfulness is required at all times. But one which I first wanted to say was the basic competency. For example, if I have a union, do they really understand the laws and the aspects and their rights and duties and all those things? Similarly, does my ER person also understand all these things, nuances of this, so that we have a very healthy dialogue rather than we just getting into पता नहीं वो मतलब क्या पूछ लेंगे कैसा होगा. So rather than, so I first said that. So one is the technical skills, which is pure technical. Which code is, what is the impact of the new 4 codes? The second is, as you rightly said, is the behavioral skills. And it's not just these things. I think some of these skills, while may not be teachable, in the sense that you can't go to a class and teach as to how to be more respectful, how to be more empathetic. But I think if these can be reinforced by our behavior, especially by the leaders, automatically then it percolates down into the culture of the organization.
So we have Dr. Jitendra Kumar Jha with us as a panelist, and I would like to welcome Dr. Jitendra Jha. He's an academics from he's a fellow of IIM Ahmedabad, and he's teaching HRM at XLRI, is a premier institutions we all know, and he's actively involved in consulting, managerial development programs, and his forte in HR analytics, performance management. So he looks like a very well-rounded academics to talk about this particular subject. So let's hear Dr. Jha. Welcome, Dr. Jha. So your time is up to 10 minutes. Over to you, Dr. Jha.
Yes. Am I audible, Mr. Pankaj?
Yes. You're audible. Yeah. Your PPT is also visible.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you so much for the introduction, and thank you so much, FICCI, for inviting XLRI to participate, which for the very critical session, which is on the future of industrial relation. However, it is the big topic, but still I have tried to just keep it short and brief, and I hope it will be informative to all of us. So the moment I totally agree with the, Mr. Vijay, we all talk about HR competency framework, we all talk about HR competency, but we never talked about IR competency framework. We talk about HR business partner role, we never talk about employee relation business partner role. So for that, I have developed some framework where we can lead to creating cordial industrial relation in Indian context. Before that, I would like to share how it had been industrial relation in India. So if you see, it was always a power play between the three competing factors, I will say, whether it's a management, union, and third is definitely the employee's interest, government. Now, over the years, we have seen certain phases where union had dominated. We talk about the 70s, early 80s, where we have seen the militancy era of union. We have also seen certain phases where employer, the management has dominated out of these three factors. That was the early industrialization and pre-independence of the country. Now, if I show you this diagram, which I have tried to put, who has got the bargaining power post-COVID scenario? And I have mentioned all three factors. And from the size of the Venn diagram, I have tried to send the message. Who has grown its pie when it comes to the bargaining power in the industrial relation in the context of COVID, and I will say in the context of 4 codes which has been introduced. So briefly, I will touch on all these factors so that we can understand how government has now tried to take the larger share in managing the industrial piece in Indian context. How the codes will be implemented, how unions will react, how management will implement, how workers will see their benefit. All these factors are definitely will be reality in coming few months and years. So if you see the government in the past 1 year, 4 codes which was introduced, I will just give some bullet point of it. Focus on the skill development program. I am attending this session since morning, and even in my research also I have seen the skill gap is the one of the biggest factor which is going to affect or improve the situation of our Indian industry and hence our skill level in the larger context. So if you see, there are a variety of skill program which has been introduced by government. More than 15 ITIs India have producing more than 2 millions of skilled workforce. Now the question is, 12,000 crore has been recently infused by government of India to the various skill programs. But the question is, despite having all these type of initiatives, whether the skills which Indian programs or the skill development program is producing, how effective is that? So that answer can come from the industry. We are also in touch with the industry, trying to understand the skill gap produced and required, pre-COVID, post-COVID both. The most important factor which I have seen from the management perspective and the union perspective also, apart from the government, I will highlight it later in the next slide, what changes government has done. Do we know our workers? So the workers that we were managing 60 years back are the same workers now we are managing. So I was just looking at the data on the demographic dividend, and certainly it caught my attention when I saw by 2025, 97 crore of the population, Indian population, would be using the smartphones and have access to internet. Currently, it is around 69 to 70 crore. And at the same time, 54% of your population is less than 25 years of age, which is second highest after China in terms of the aging of the population. In the last year, I just randomly seeing the decline in strike and lockout. Some of these lockouts are not reported also, that is different issue. After 2012, I see there is a sudden decline in strike, and in 2050, the reported strike was in India 40. So data I took from the Labor Ministry data. Now the question is, educated workforce, lack of union leadership, and the demographic dividend that I have talked about, and the strike, which is the visual, evidence. Why all these data are important to discuss when we are moving into the future of industrial relation? We need to understand whom we are managing. Is union understanding the workers? Is government understanding the workers? Is management or the industry understanding the workers? Unfortunately, over the years, the way workers have been managed by government, union, and management, somewhere, except a few industry, except a few companies, or except a few occasions, we have always seen the one who has suffered a lot is worker. Worker interest is the center of union, government, and management, and unfortunately, worker is the one who suffered a lot, which means there are certain processes of the government, certain processes of the union, and certain practices of the management which has not taken care of the workers' interest. What are those? Now, why these COVID? When this COVID came, the failure of our all process part of management, union, government was highlighted. We all witnessed that. Whether it's a social security, social dialogue, social inclusiveness, and protection of the right, it was completely on the road that we have seen. Fortunately, I will say, because of the COVID, there are certain provisions which has been added into the social security code in terms of interstate migrant workers, their protection, creation of their databases, extending the social security not only to migrant workers, to unorganized worker. Country like India, where 95% of the employment is in the informal sector. Currently, I am dealing with the workers working in jewelry manufacturing industry, where it is almost it is an informal sector, and they work in a hazardous working conditions. After reading the security code, social security code, I am little relaxed. Now at least the unorganized worker, gig workers, platform workers, so all have been included in the social security. There will be a social security board having representation from the workers, having representation from the state, having representation from the aggregator. All your platform workers like service provider like your Zomato, Swiggy, Ola, Uber, all will create a pool of fund where cap has been kept there. 1 to 2% of the contribution of their turnover will come into this fund, maximum to 5% what they are paying to their workers as a salary and all. The question is why I am little relaxed with the social security, because it is the first time where we have seen all our unorganized workers have been put into the under security coverage, which we have seen during the lockdown, how bare feet they were walking down to their native places, no food, no medicine, no work, no money, no cash in hand. So therefore, in that way, I will say this is the progressive step which has been done. Second, in the industrial relation, we have seen why this strike, lockout and all has come. Now workers are educated. When HR says my workers, the demographic says they require short-term employment, they can negotiate their employment directly with me. They are looking for short-term employment contract. So when it comes to managing the workers, given the kind of competition, kind of economic condition we have, in IR also we require flexible work engagement. And the first time we have seen in the Social Security and Industrial Relation Code, FTE has been institutionalized. Fixed term employment has been institutionalized. In the past 10 years, the contract worker FTE participation, which casually known as temporary worker, has increased. But now, Social Security Code ensure that they will also get the protection in terms of insurance and PF. From the management perspective, IR always had been a approach, using an approach called reactive approach to manage the industrial unrest. Management and the industry has never thought that we have to proactive. We need to understand the workers. We need to directly connect with them. We need to understand the changing role of the union, and then we need to manage it. Same time, union also consider themselves there just as a bargaining agent. So when you consider yourself just as a bargaining agent, then you try to influence the whether it's a government or management on the factor which may or may not be beneficial for the worker, which has happened in the past. But now, when government has given you, I just open the slide so that you can read some of the provisions of these codes. So what happens when all these laws are there, which is there to protect the interest of the worker? Now, responsibility of the management and the responsibility of the union is, can you create new role for union in the industrial relations space? Because now everything is written now code. Of course, there will be certain amendment, development and all, depending upon how it will be implemented. It is not the final code, we can say. But as of now, if I see this code, for example, in a wage code, your allowances cannot exceed 50%, which means government is trying to ensure your fixed component of the income, which is your basic pay, DA and retaining allowances, it should be minimum 50%. Any exceeding amount of other allowances, whether it's your house rent, other conveyance allowances, if it is exceeding, it will get added to the wages, and all other bonuses and the benefit is linked with the wages. Your PF is linked with the wages, which means if your wages are increasing, their social security will get ensured. So that is the overall agenda of the all code. If I see at the same time, flexibility to the employer, flexibility to the industry is also given in terms of raising the threshold of minimum workers, which earlier used to be 10 and 20. Now it's 20 and 40. For contract and contractor, it's a 50. Earlier it was 20. For layoff, earlier it was 200. Now it is 300. For union participation to become the sole negotiator, earlier it was 75% of the membership required, now it is 51%. So if I see in terms of giving the notice for the strike, 7 days, and within the 5 days you have to inform the conciliation officer. And when it is with the tribunal, 60 days, you cannot go for strike and lockout. So if I combine all these codes, I have deliberately put certain provisions only. You see, flexibility to the employer is ensured to the industry. At the same time,
I'm sorry, Dr. Jha, sorry to interfere. If you can wind up in 1 or 2 minutes.
Yes. So if you see employee interest, the flexibility, and finally the future provision has been put into this framework. So this is the emerging framework from all the discussion we had. The employer relation business partner from the union, there is one organization which actually came up with the idea where they wanted to train their union into various dynamics of the business and the labor laws, and which Mr. Vijay also highlighted, and that is a good initiative. That is the first step. Then again, you have maintaining equity in the employment relation with the contract worker, FTF, and the regular employees. The most important aspect here is bringing ethical, sociological, strategic, and the legal perspective. Right now, we are dealing industrial relation from the perspective of law only, but we need to bring all these perspective also. Then strict action during the crisis, and the last and the most important is, do you have the dialogue with the employees, the workers? So if you keep all these factors into a picture, then definitely creating IR climate will be much easier in the industry context. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Jha. Thank you. We would like to ask you questions, but I'll keep those questions reserved in the end, because other speakers also, we need to listen to them in the interest of time. And you spoke very well, and you actually emphasized on the point that it has become more proactive rather than reactive, and that actually captures the whole essence of these institutional reforms which the government has brought about. So we'll have questions for you, but may I invite Mr. Pankaj Diwan, the next speaker in the panel. Pankaj Diwan, he is the deputy plant head at Daikin Air Conditioning India, and he has got 36 years of industry experience, having expertise in engineering, R&D, quality, supply chain, HR, IR, general affairs, training, and factory legal matters. He also holds position of Vice President Supply Chain and General Affairs. Welcome, Pankaj, and we are looking forward to hear you. Over to you, sir.
Good afternoon, everybody, and thanks, Dr. Prabhat Pankaj, for introducing me. And I also express gratitude to management of FICCI Rajasthan for inviting representations from Daikin, Nimrana. I'm glad to be part of this event today. So I will go through our, first of all, our work culture, which helped us in transformation from pre-COVID to post-COVID, and how we converted adversity into diversity. We at Daikin India established manufacturing plant in 2009 here in Nimrana, Japanese zone. And now we have 3 factories and 1 R&D center where we develop products for other countries also. And now we are employing around 3,000 people. So our group philosophy is people-centered management, flat and fast organization, and open office culture. We follow equality in basic welfare facilities, and discipline means basic rules are followed by top management first and to factory shop floor employees. We ensure safety first culture related to employees. Continuous dialogue and communication with groups of employees is our priority. We have adequate mix of employees by education, location, gender diversity. We give opportunity to 10th standard ITI skilled operators and then diploma engineers. In our factory, engineers get chance to work on shop floors with their own hands. We already sustained a recruitment of 15% of female employees, and most of these work in shop floor. They are on unskilled jobs as well as they are highly skilled hands-on engineers. We target to take this to 20% in a year time. We ensure safety by female security, designated place in canteen, tea and rest area, and in transport. We also provided crutch with all facilities with a female taking care of kids, lady nurse in first aid room. I feel pride in sharing that our female technicians are highly skilled in brazing and welding also. We conduct skill competition in-house as well as global level, where these females started participation and winning top positions. These females proved to be more disciplinary during this crisis situation and helped us by contributing more. We also developed Daikin Japanese Institute of Manufacturing Excellence. This institute is our CSR project. This institute will be used to train unskilled youth on various Japanese manufacturing processes, safety and environment to help them getting certifications and jobs in industry. 3 batches already trained with our existing factory training center and absorbed. Now in 2021, this institute will be in full swing and this will help youth in Rajasthan. And this is our philosophy to convert the unskilled labor into employable, skilled people. I would like to touch upon some general industry related issues crop up after COVID-19, which needs to be addressed for a better future is work from home, especially in IT industries. Such industries need to develop a mechanism to monitor work-life balance, how to evaluate employees working remotely, how to fill gaps of leisure activities like get-togethers we used to do earlier, celebrations, recognitions. In our kind of industry for manufacturing, work from home is limited to few departments, which we are able to manage nicely by making proper rules, keeping them on rotation, and also we prefer to work in shifts. I witnessed that earlier some of the people were dreaming to work from home, but now they prefer to work from office. So we are giving them chance by rotation, twice a week they can work from home and then from office. Like that we are managing well. Our subject of automation is in discussion. Our viewpoint on this also, we need a balanced approach. Automation must be applied for operations which are critical to quality and difficult to perform by human beings. Also, IoT-based control automations on various operations will be fruitful, and now it is need of hour to have an overall good control on machines and production processes from remotely we can monitor. However, we have to consider need of job opportunities for youth in our country. That is utmost importance in our country and in our state. Now I will share how we strongly cross over this pandemic time. During first week of March itself, we visualized the upcoming problem of COVID-19 and we implemented basic safety measures in our factory premises, even much before lockdown happened. And during lockdown, we experienced extraordinary help from government of Rajasthan. We stayed connected with local administration and senior people in Jaipur. We were the first among Nimrana Japanese zone to start the factory on 20th April itself. The purpose of restarting the factory so early was to spread a positive message among customers, among employees, and all around during that tough time. Although we suffered severe hit on our business, as the timing was exactly when peak business month starts for air conditioning industry. Our godowns were full of finished goods, and we didn't need any production, but still we started. So we protected 100% jobs and salaries of all employees. Initially, we started very minimum people and did production preparation work and gradually increased. And later we found many of junior employees went to their hometown then at the time of migration. But recently, most of them have joined back and we welcomed them. And our total strength reached close to 3,000, same as in March 2020. What positive factors during this time we observed were management and employees relations become closer as both sides' supportive attitudes were visible. And we learned the new method of trainings by on virtual platform. So we use this lockdown time as well as post-COVID. We are using this for doing all trainings, technical trainings, as well as behavioral change trainings. And this is very fruitful. And trust on government of Rajasthan scale to new heights, as I personally experienced how they worked in extreme stressed environment. And we got replies round the clock. And that is how we expanded our factories in Nimrana. We have now 3 factories and one R&D center and finished goods warehouse. And finally, business also bounced back with new continuous actions. And we expect a jump in industrial growth in our country and this part of Rajasthan. So I will stop here for any questions.
Thank you. Thank you, Pankaj Diwanji. It was very precise, and you shared the example of your company, Daikin, and how it has transited, and what are the problems that you sorted out, and what are the new models of work-life balance and supportive attitude you developed in your company. So it's a good example that you have presented. We'll go to now the last speaker of this panel, Ms. Jyoti Singh. We have with us Ms. Jyoti Singh. Welcome, Jyoti ji. Ms. Jyoti Singh is HR and planning head at Honda Cars India Limited, and she has 20 years of industry experience in IT at IT and automobile companies, namely HCL, Birla Soft, and Honda Car India Limited. She has key interest in HR, IT transformation, organizational culture, capability development, diversity, and inclusiveness. Over to you, Jyoti ji. We are eager to hear your views.
Thank you very much, Dr. Prabhat, and thank you very much, my co-speakers. I hope I'm audible.
You're audible, but your visual is not seen. Actually, we are not able to see you on the screen.
Okay, I've put it on. Let me see if it is creating some
it'd be
kind.
Nice to see you also.
Sure, I am trying. Maybe there's a network issue. I'm sitting out of office.
But if it is not possible, no problem, but you can speak.
Sure. I've put on the video, so if it does not work, please let me know still. And I would also want to share a small presentation I have prepared. So is the presentation visible?
No.
Okay.
Jyoti, I will share your presentation from here. You can talk.
Oh, thank you so much, Rahul. So I'll wait for the presentation to come, but I think I can already start with the context. So when we talk about inclusive workplace, and that is the topic which first slide, please.
That's the first slide.
Yes. So it means you welcome and you encourage everybody around. The place is more accommodative. It you have more gender, ethnicity, social background associates, people with special abilities around. But the whole idea of inclusive workplace is little more than that. And here I would want to share my idea of inclusive workplace. And what surprises me is how we are just driven by the idea of West on diversity and inclusiveness, because in our culture inclusiveness has been long embedded, and we do not need any kind of corporate jargons, or we call as daftar jargons, to understand what inclusiveness is. Basically, I would want to quote, from Ramcharitmanas, where Lord Krishna says that whoever thinks of me becomes mine, irrespective of that person being male, female, and queer, as long as they give up malice. So the whole idea of being having an inclusive work environment is when the organization give up any kind of malice, indifference and resentment out of the system, and make more space for everybody to be adaptive and accommodative. So that's the whole idea of inclusive workplace. I would keep my discussion and my experiences strictly to Honda, because it's a great place to work, where we have industrial relations, HR, and workers coming from different kind of categories, classes, culture, language, and religion, and working together. Harmony is what creates our inclusive workplace. And I would want to quote a time when it was a year 1971, and that time Mr. Honda was not leading the top chair, and there was a new setup, new organization heads who were taking care of. And as you understand, Honda is a founder driven company, and when a founder is not there, the organization may lost the sense of direction or belongingness. And the whole idea was to make everybody adapt and become more inclusive and own the organization, rather than just a top founder running the organization. So here Mr. Kawashima-san, who was at the time at the top chair, he quoted, because he was facing an issue of motivating the employees, and everybody was so much under the charm of Mr. Honda's leadership, that they were feeling a little lost. So I would want to quote, his words, which he said: "Each of us is an ordinary person who does not even come close to Mr. Honda. However, each one of us has at least one area where we are a little bit better than Mr. Honda. So we should work by putting such areas together. Let's think we can work together to outrage, exceed one genius." Now, I really like this code, because that brings, the whole essence of inclusivity, where, as an individual, there might be some gaps. But when you bring, everybody together onto one platform, and look at individual excellences rather than individual, gaps, you become an inclusive work environment. And again, inclusiveness can be looked from two ways. One, external inclusiveness, where you try to bring, people from diversified background. There are different genders, there are different abilities. People would be looking, you create different approaches for them, different schemes for them, and there's a law which prevails, which encourages you to follow kind of forcefully that inclusiveness, which we see, in recent times, a lot of, government initiatives are coming on to bring inclusiveness. However, there is another thing where you need not go outside. It's a whole perspective of internal inclusiveness. And what do you mean by internal inclusiveness is looking inside and making everybody involved in the organization decision making, or creating an inclusive work culture. For a successful IR situation, this is very, very important. And I would again, go back to what Honda philosophy stands, and how our IR and our all the philosophies and policies are guided through the inclusive work environment. Honda, has basic two principles, where one of the strong principle is respect for the individual. And when we say that, respect for the individual, we talk about trust, initiative, and equality, which a person should be bringing to the table, to the organization, and to the work. And this is deep rooted in our ways of working. This is deep rooted in our philosophy. This is deep rooted in how we look at our work and our relationships within the organization. So when we talk about trust, it means that we should trust the efforts of our workers. We should trust that they are coming with the right sense, provide them freedom to work, and keep them enthusiastic about their approach. That is the whole meaning of trust over here. We talk about initiatives. A lot of organizations, kind of force things. There are policies which bind you, but Honda has a culture where we encourage freedom and open-mindedness, where ideas are more developed on the table, and ideas are generated on our Gemba site, which we call as the workshop, where the efforts are seen with the light of what are we trying to achieve. And equality doesn't mean giving everybody same pay or same benefits. Equality means fair treatment everywhere, and we have great examples of where we show that what equality means and how it impacts the industrial relationship. I'll just try to talk more about all these three traits, which helps us in building our inclusive work environment and sets a harmonious industrial relationship. There are certain policies or certain programs which we run. For example, we have a common cafeteria where everybody, irrespective of their level or designation, have same kind of food served on the same table. We do not have executive dining areas. I have been to certain organizations where you have an executive dining area where special food is served on good china platters, but here we have same platters, same plates, same people serving the food. Be you are an SVP or you are a new joinee or you are a factory employer worker. That brings the whole concept of inclusiveness, the right on the treatment. We have open sitting space. The chair of our top executive to the chair of junior executive are not different. It's the same space where everybody exhibits during their working day. We have a common white uniform. Now, uniforms, are there in certain organizations and they have a certain value, they have certain positioning, but our white uniform straight denotes that everybody has to be equal and they have to keep the uniform clean, even when you're working, at a workshop where there's a lot of grease and grit, you have to stay clean of it. So white uniform does not denote that you are an R&D worker. White uniform denotes you are a Honda employee. So that's the kind of concept which has been built. Another interesting thing which I want to talk about, which shows how we have inverted the pyramid of development at our entry level, is NHC. NHC is New Honda Circles, and it's a beautiful idea which was conceptualized several years back, which brings innovation, equality right at the root, of where the work happens. So here, our associates or our workers identify an improvement area in their daily work, and then this development work or an improvement idea is shared at various levels, and to a level it goes global. When it goes to the global, there's a global recognition which happens. Imagine your factory workers traveling to our different offices, in different countries, and experiencing that joy of working and joy of belonging to a truly big organization. A factory worker which would have never traveled away from their, from their village or a place of stay to the factory, they are made to travel along with the top executives, and then they do a factory visit. They visit our different offices in our different countries, and for full 2-3 days there are 300-400 workers together celebrating how they have contributed to creation of new Honda. uh, the NHC circle starts from the problem which we have now and the solution which we can propose in future and how it will work. So our workers work from now Honda to new Honda concept. And this brings complete inclusiveness into the entire experience, into the entire journey. This is a complete 1-year journey where they work with different kind of teams. They have different reviewers. There are reviewers who would not understand their language. They have to work out a way of making their presentations which could be understood by people who would not even understand English or their local language. The presentations are done mostly in local languages. So the whole concept of them thinking to like a top executive, an idea which will change the way you're working, the idea which will change the profit lines of the company, is put actually at the worker level. And that's how in our working relationship we brings that whole idea of bringing more inclusiveness to it. When we talk about, again, inclusiveness and IR, there are a lot of data which has been shared today. Some piece of data I also have right now with me, which shows that during the 20 years, on an average, about 10 industrial disputes have happened in our country, and almost 12,000 workers have resulted in some kind of loss. And if you have to look at the loss of working days, it's almost 13,000 working days per year. This is what is reported in our country. Industrial relationships or industrial harmony has always been a point of concern, because somewhere we are not able to set up the best examples or best benchmarks. And the whole effort and whole idea is, instead of working towards inside improvement, we have been mostly looking at outside I would say biases. So how do we make sure that the leadership understands the importance of inclusive work environment and what they can do? The first and the most important thing is communication, the importance of communication. There may be a lot of policies, there may be a lot of programs, but if the right intent of having those programs and policies are not communicated, if there are not enough forums for us to communicate, then the whole idea of creating an inclusive work environment is lost. So if we need to create in our factory environment more forums where there is a communication. When I say communication, it should not be the union leader speaking to the union members. It should be the your workers speaking about what improvements are they looking for, and they're taking the responsibility and ownership of driving those changes. The change makers can't be the top leadership. The change makers are the owners of bringing that change, has to be shifted where the real action is happening. Recognition. We all like to be recognized, and it is the most underrated thing which actually hurts these sentiments. So if the organizations show gratitude and appreciation, it means a lot. At Honda, we celebrate a day which is called as Prerna Divas. And the whole idea of Prerna Divas is that we recognize the efforts of our associates, not only on what they have done at work, but we also recognize what their contribution towards the society. So if a factory worker has saved somebody in the accident or somebody in a bad situation, we celebrate it internally. We do not put into the newspapers or anywhere. We create internal bulletins and make sure that the good effort of that person is recognized. So there's a lot of recognition which brings the true qualities of that person. Then there's another thing which we call as giving and receiving continuous feedback. Fortunately, unfortunately, we have eyes which look outside, to the others. But most of the time, the best way to know what are gaps, in our internal policies or programs is to ask for feedback. So we go back and we ask them, we do open debates and try to understand how we can bring more improvements. And again, as I said, the ownership of bringing those improvements is not on the management. Those ownerships are put back onto these associates or workers, because through open forums we create cross-functional teams and we make them as the leaders of cross-functional teams. So in the cafeteria, it's our workers who will decide what we should have on a Diwali day or what we should have on a Navratra time. So these kind of committees actually helps us in getting the feedback on how we are doing and what improvements are actually worth investing or looking at it. Again, to elaborate more on visible inclusive leadership, which is very, very important for running a smooth IR function in this time, is
Sorry to interfere. Can you wind it up in next
sure,
one minute? Yeah.
Sure.
We have less time.
Is visible commitments and knowing what is how's the health and how's the status of going about, which is curiosity about others. Being aware of the biases, bias is what will definitely disturb the fiber of industrial relation. Cultural intelligence. People are coming from different backgrounds. So you, as an IR person or as an IR team, need to understand what is this. Stay, having humility and collaboration. So if these traits we are able to, imbibe in our inclusive leadership, I'm sure we will be able to create a great inclusive work environment. Again, just to summarize, as the time is running short, I would just want to say inclusive leadership is not about occasional grand gestures, but it's small, regular commitments and actions which can be shared and which can have a real impact. with which I, come to the end of my presentation. Thank you very much for your patient listening.
Thank you, Jyoti. I'm so sorry to interfere in between your talk because we have to follow the time, and this is just for the sake of maintaining time that I had to. Wonderful deliberation. You have actually touched upon very, extensively on inclusive workplace that you have been able to create at your organization based on trust, initiative, and equality, and a lot of initiatives that you have taken are wonderful. And these are the examples which others can also follow. Just to summarize, 4 points as a learning from this particular session, how conducive IR can be built by the organizations. The speakers actually focused more on first creating the conducive environment and practices. So they talked about a lot of practices from their own experiences and their understanding how a conducive environment and the relationship between building relationship between the employer and employees to make the IR more functional rather than antagonistic or challenging environment where they always are dragging at the dragon drones, and the reforms that have been made by by changing all this almost like 29-30 labor laws into 4 different codes. These are actually geared towards bringing about a lot of institutional reforms in the country. So at the time for big economic reforms is one take by the government. The other take is institutional reforms. So big time institutional reforms are happening. And this is actually precisely improving the ease of doing business positioning of India at the global level. And this is actually going to help the business. So this is the direction of reforms. And all these reforms do not actually affect only the internal environment of the organization, industry and company, but it also affects their relationship with the society and their relationship with the economy. And therefore, it's a kind of options choice, kind of options choice everybody is actually facing these days. The option choice is about the fact that you are forced to change certain things, looking at the environmental change that is happening at the global level and local level, and then the changes that you bring about for yourself actually in turn starts affecting the external environment. So it becomes a kind of circle of changes that is happening. So it's not only you're getting affected by what is happening outside, and the things are changing at the digital platform, or maybe the work environment, or the way people are offering themselves in the labor market, but the changes that we are trying to bring about at our own level is also affecting others, the environment around. So that's one big takeaway from this session. The second is it is very important that we focus on inclusive workplace and bring about a lot of things like our speakers have spoken about trust, empathy, collaboration. These are all non-cognitive competencies that has to be. This is a big challenge, and the experimentations that have been made, which have been very successful also in creating this environment in many industries, are worth looking at. The third thing that all of you have spoken about is empowering the employees is very critical factor, because if you're not empowering, they can never become a proactive partner in the development. So it's about more about development, creating development partnership rather than the traditional way of looking at IR. The fourth thing that all of you have emphasized is on the need for training and skill building, because these are new things coming up in the place. Building non-cognitive capacity competencies are also not just possible without proper skilling, training, and leading by example, and the leadership, which is the 10-feet leadership, the 100-feet leadership, and the 1,000-feet leadership. When you start visioning, then you become the partner in work, and then you actually lead by example. So a good combination of these 3 models of leaderships are required. So thank you so much, all the speakers. And in the end, I would like each one of you to give your concluding remarks in 30 seconds. If possible, we can start with Professor Jitendra Jha. Your take, sir.
You are on mute, sir.
You're still on mute. You're still on mute.
So only one thing, that we need to institutionalize ERBP role at workplace, where union participation and partnership role is important.
Okay. Very good. Can we move on to Vijay Sethi? I think Vijay Sethi has left. So can we move to Mr. Pawan Diwanji? Pawanji, your take, last concluding remarks from your side.
I would say that more participation of employees and shop floor workers, operators on all the decisions and welfare activities. So that will help industry in the new changing scenario of the labor codes.
Can we hear from Ms. Jyoti now? Your concluding remarks, Ms. Jyoti.
Thank you very much. We need to invert the pyramid, bring the workforce at the front face, rather than making policies in the boardrooms. That's my take for inclusive work culture. Thank you very much.
So thank you very much from FICCI's side, and thank you so much from my own personal behalf. The last concluding remarks from my side is that, well, the challenge is to understand now how organization can meet their needs for profit and the need for change. You know, these are the goals that they have to combine together. So how they are actually looking at the needs for profit and the need for change while supporting the employees, and their well-being in the digital world over a long period of time. So it cannot be just one-time change. It has to be a far-seated, long-term change that they have to look at. So this is the challenge that each one of us are going to face. And we have our own answers for that. So thank you so much for this deliberation, and it's a wonderful to be here with all of you. Thank you, FICCI. Over to you, Atulji, Rahulji.
Thank you, Dr. Pankaj. It was again yet another interesting session with rich panel of speakers. We would like to thank all our partners for the program: Honda Cars India Limited, DCM Shriram Limited, Jaipur Institute of Management, and Manipal University, Jaipur. In fact, only two of our speakers we missed out today. One was Mr. Pednika and one was Dr. Prabhu from Manipal for some reason. But all in all, it was a very enriching day and enriching discussion. Any closing comments from Mr. Yadav? It was a long day for you also.
Yeah, I will say actually it was very enriching, very fruitful discussion, which very clearly you see described by our eminent speakers, means what is the situation during the COVID and how it's going to be in the future. And especially Dr. Jitendra has sketched out a very good framework for the ER, which is very educative. And so we have a good roadmap, and I think everybody who is participating in this program must have gained a lot. And so thank you very much, all the eminent speakers, moderators, and of course, Atulji, you and Rahulji, who have made it very powerful and on time to conclude it. So I think it's by and large a very good summit. Again, we could conclude in a fifth summit of HR for FICCI HR Rajasthan Committee. Just I want to say this and thanks everybody. Rahul, you are on mute.
Thank you all speakers, and we will now close this session here. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.